Continue with our budget discussions. Start with our city manager. Any initial comments, please?
Okay. Got a raspy voice, so I'm going to not talk too much tonight if I can. Page 99 has the summary of human services. So if you turn to that, we can. I'll just discuss a couple of things that are changes. Human Services has 4 divisions: Senior Center, Youth and Family Services, Administration/Adult and Family Services, and then Recreation. I want to point out that Recreation has a request of about $822,000, and then the proposed is $436,000. Now, the reason that is that the maintenance maintainers in the recreation budget, the ones that maintain the fields, the recreation fields, they're proposed to be moved to the Public Works Department. And it's a 2-phase move. The first will be physically moving them there, and the second is negotiable about changing the union to have them be in one union. So right now they're in, believe it or not, they're in separate unions. One is in Town Hall and one is in Public Works, even though their jobs are very similar. So what you see there is the elimination of and the transfer of those positions, plus all the supplies, services, and items that would have occurred in here if it was not consolidated. So that's why there's about a $300,000 to $400,000 difference in that. So the consolidation will be effective July 1st. We hope to get eventually economies of scale, hopefully interchangeability. That will be limited before they're in the same union, since there's real definitions of what bargaining group work is, and the bargaining groups are very protective of what their work is. So I don't want to overstep our bounds on that. So we feel that there would be good economies of scale. There would be one supervisor, ultimately, and that would be the Public Works Director. Then within the Public Works Director, our superintendent, and then a foreman who would also be part of the team of supervision. This is something I started 5 years ago and then kind of put it on hold when I had some issues with negotiations. Now decided to do it in 2 phases, get them over there, and then negotiate. And we do have a contract up this year, so the timing is good. So we don't have to reopen the contract to do it. So it fits in well with the timing. So with that, we can start on page 102. And I'll let, everybody has met Tara, right? Everybody's met Tara? If you haven't, you can wave. So, the first division is Senior Center, and Senior Center is pretty much back up to full status with COVID-19. It was closed for a while and then phased back into operation. Never was closed as far as services. We provided transportation and other needs to meet the needs of the seniors. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tara, and she could give any highlights that he wishes to share, and then we'll take questions.
Tara, welcome.
Thank you. I don't know that there's any highlights that I would share. Just want to comment that I am fine with what's been put forth in the general fund budget for this department. I do have conversation about ARPA when we get there. Does anyone have questions for me?
You want to take them?
Do you want to go to each division, or do you want to take them separate?
Right.
We'll go by division.
Okay,
So we'll just stay with senior center for now.
okay. Are there questions of the senior center budget? Members? Pro Tem, please.
Hi, Tara. Welcome
Thank you.
to your first round at this. The first question I have for you is on the senior center, in terms of your staffing and the ability to provide programs as we come out of the pandemic. I would imagine the senior center is going to get a lot more busy. Are you satisfied that what's here in the budget will be able to deliver the programs you envision to our seniors? And what would be next? What would be the evolution in terms of growth?
So I have to rely heavily on feedback from Mike on this because I haven't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with the senior center. I've been focused in other divisions. From Mike's feedback, the only comment that he has had is losing their office assistant position that they used to have has really kind of hindered some of their progress. He ends up sitting at the front desk. They've had to scale back on some of their program coordination because of that. So I think if you asked him that he would love to have a position back in, I don't have enough information to comment further on from my perspective at this point.
So, if I may, so just on that one topic, one thing that I would encourage you and Mike to investigate, with Norwich Tech being directly across the street, with a health tech program in that building, and also a marketing and entrepreneurship and customer service shop in there, that may be a work-based learning opportunity for the students might also serve that need that Mike has brought to your attention, at least during the school day.
That's a good idea.
So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members?
Just a quick one.
Alderman Singh.
Thank you. So I know the requested utilities were less and we are giving more. Is there any reason? Are we adding anything to the any equipment that's been added? That's why.
Now, that is one of the other benefits of the consolidation is we'll have use of the park garage. I don't know if we've determined if we can fit them in there yet. Have you? You haven't had a chance to get up there?
No, Mike was going to go measure.
Okay, we haven't measured yet to make sure. Right now, the vans are exposed to weather and vandalism, and we're hoping to be able to use the park garage because the park garage equipment will go down to the public works garage.
Okay.
So, and originally there was a garage that was proposed in the capital budget, which we didn't fund, but with this transition, if everything fits, we'll be able to use that. So there are some capital projects, but not in recreation more than anything else, not in senior center.
Okay. And my other question is, the trend is that active members are reducing. Do we know any reasons or for that?
So I think, it was reduced during COVID.
Okay.
When projected numbers were put forth, that was back in October. So I'm taking a guess here that it also was based on COVID projections. I think that we'd have to really relook at that at this stage. A lot's changed in a few months.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate assumption, yeah.
Thank you. Other members on this division? Okay, let's move
Okay,
forward, please.
the next division is, in Human Services, is Youth and Family Services. This is a fairly status quo budget. We actually adjusted the regular employee salaries upward a little bit by 10,000. And that's why you see a little bit of a difference in the requested to the proposed.
Questions? Yes, Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. So, adolescent mental health has been in the news quite a bit. All right, I think you know that I walk that path every day with 700 teenagers in my building. What do you see in terms of programming and need for the community coming from Youth and Family Services Division, if at all?
So I think right now we've been very lucky. We've had ARPA allocations to work with, and there's 8 contracted service providers and clinical workers providing programs through ARPA dollars, and we're set to get another allocation. I think, certainly somewhere down the line, the city's probably going to have to look at what other role do we need to play there. I'm hoping to have more opportunity to explore different types of funding options so that there's grants enhancing services in the department. I know Erin's always looking for other grant opportunities as well. It's absolutely a need, and youth and family and rec programs are crucial right now.
So the conversation has been that, the ARPA money, needs to be spent by December 24, right? 2024? Is that correct? Right? But the need is going to continue. My personal spitball is a decade. I see this being at least a decade out before we get back to to where we were pre-pandemic. I don't even want to call it normal because it wasn't normal then, but it's much worse now. So I would ask you to keep close track of how effective the programs that are being funded by ARPA are, and the kind of the refinements that you make, because those will be important discussions when it comes time for whoever's sitting up here to try to find the money to provide these services out of the budget versus out of grant funding only goes for so long, the ARPA money is only going to be there for so long. That would be a great help to the councils of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Good evening. So kind of sticking with that part, and I'm looking more so at the ARPA allocation of the community health service. And I think, and you've kind of already answered it, the plan is to continue contracting with those providers still using that allocation. Now, and the reason I asked that question is kind of looking at the overview of where we are as a community, as a department, and more so I think of it in a reorganizational part as a department. Are you doing anything to look at possibly what it would look like changing and having a clinician or something of that sort on staff and things of those sorts, what that benefit would be to a department other than just the caseworker and things of that sort, to kind of handle some of these needs down the road. Because I think for me, that, as you've said, these allocations are going to go, and what do we do then to make sure that we are still providing these services? Because mental health is not going to be solved in a year or two. It's an evolutionary process.
So I think we're very lucky to have Erin in charge there, because she is an LCSW. I mean, again, I haven't spent enough time here to really be able to offer a lot of thoughts on it, but off the top of my head, from a fiscal standpoint, it makes sense to contract clinicians in that department rather than looking at bringing ones on for staff.
So and this is just me thinking ahead, this is something where we could possibly see several years from now, or once this allocation is complete, a request within the budget so that those services could continue being contracted or provided.
Contracted would make sense, yes.
Okay.
Other questions, other members? Alderwoman Gould?
Thank you for being here tonight. What types of providers do you work with in the community mental health services area?
So I don't know that I can properly answer that. We have 8 contracted people at this moment. 2 used to be on staff here in the city. They've continued services through that department on a contracted basis. There's 2 of them are clinical, so they've got to be at least LCSW, and 6 are running groups. So those would be probably master level social work.
So these are 8 or 5 or 6 just individuals. We're not partnering with a program through Hartford Healthcare, UCFS?
Not at the moment, not with how we're allocating the ARPA funds now.
Okay.
Although I've seen that mentioned in the work plan.
Okay, and with the ARPA funds, you're going to be, the city manager has proposed $175,000 for job training. Can you elaborate on what kind of job training we are giving our underserved youth or residents here in the city? What kind of programs are we getting them into, or?
So that was the youth employment. That's money that was allocated to support youth working in the community. So youth employment, they get on the job training. So we run it similar to how summer youth employment is run with the various work sites, getting hands-on work experience. So ARPA funds are being used in that capacity, as well as supporting students in a variety of programs, such as the nursing program at Three Rivers.
And who are we partnering with for on-site job training?
I don't have that list. The summer youth employment coordinator has, I think he has some 50 different work sites in the area that he's working with at this point.
So it's just for youth, we're not for adults?
If we're talking about the same pot of money, yes. But we have additional funds. So the Three Rivers, the money that's being used along with Norwich Works, that's supporting students in Three Rivers would be adults.
And is it only for the nursing program or any program at Three Rivers?
It is not only for that. That is what was set aside in, remember, I'm coming into a plan that was already created. That was what was set aside.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wilson?
Kind of sticking with the job training piece. I know it's been done in the past. I think we've done where we've had youth after the summer employment come and work in various departments within the city. So I know it's beneficial. The one question I would have is kind of keeping with the theme of would this be a way to utilize it? Do you plan to use this allocation to also use it as an opportunity to diversify the experience of various youth in the community to the various departments in the city or businesses?
Yes, so we have one of the youth employment folks is working in our office right now, the front desk. I believe that Mike is going to potentially take someone to help with the front desk senior center for the summer. So we're in connection with all of the departments on how they can utilize youth. We've had some working all in public works all school year.
Excellent. Again, I know it's a beneficial program and gives them an insight to what it's like to work on this side. The other question I have, kind of going back to the community partners when it comes to mental health, would you agree that because of the pandemic and just everything that's kind of going on, it's been harder to partner with some of those other agencies such as Hartford Healthcare, UCFS, because they're also inundated with the requests and things of that sort?
Absolutely. Between capacity and different organizations being short-staffed, everybody's kind of, in the same bubble of short-staff, overwork, lots of things going on, so it is even more difficult to coordinate.
All set.
Thank you. Other members on this division? Just one question. The hours of professional counseling services clearly spiked in 2021 up to 1,000. The next 2 years, the projections are a little more than half of that. Is that adequate assignment of resources?
So I'm not sure which number you're looking at.
Well, I'm down on the outcome and results, the hours of professional counseling services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we have ARPA dollars that will help with that in the first allocation and being recommended for the second. So, and I'm not sure why the numbers were dropped that way, but there's certainly a need for it, and we have the services available right now.
Can you provide us later a breakdown of what that impact is with the ARP dollars, where it's being assigned for that? Thank you. Other members? Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next budget division is page 109, Administration, Adult and Family Services.
Alderman Wilson.
All right, so the first thing, and I kind of think I know the answer already, but the administrative coordinator, what is the primary function of that?
That is my right hand. She does all the finance coordination and grant coordination and grant reporting and assists with payroll, credit card reconciliation. She's kind of like our finance person in the office for the department.
Okay. Now, keeping along with that, first I'm going to ask, so in the proposed ARPA allocation, there's a position for a human service manager. Could you give me kind of what the salary range is for that, as well as what are some of the possible duties of that position?
I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the salary was set in alignment with the union, other division managers for the union. And that replaces the, well, first of all, it makes it consistent so that there is a division manager for each section of the department. It replaces the supervisor of social work position, which is what Leanne held for years. That was cut out of the budget. It's something that I've identified as needed. It's very difficult to spend time focusing a lot on the higher level department-wide goals. You know, you talk about collaborations and regionalizing efforts and finding other funding sources, and that takes time and energy. And as it stands right now, I am the supervisor of the 7 people in the Human Services office, as well as the rest of the department. We have 100 active cases right now between the case managers, and a lot of financial assistance flowing to the office. So it's just not humanly possible to focus on a lot of the things that this council and the city manager would really like to see happen.
And along with that allocation, is this a 1-year position, 2-year? What is the allocation for how many?
2 years, correct? That was put in for 2 years.
The ARPA proposal covers 18 months of salary and fringe benefits, and from there, it could be merged into the general fund budget, or we can find other funding sources to help.
Okay, and I think for me, I understand the need. My concern is, like many of the other proposed positions within both either the budget or the ARPA over time, it will impact and increase somehow in the budget. And so my concern is the sustainability of, they do the work to get the department where it needs to be, and then it's something that possibly we can't continue to maintain over time, which is a concern, which I think then again is to looking at roles and responsibilities across all of the divisions and how it will work. But I think that's, for me, a big concern with that position is it's there now. Several years from now, what does it look like if we go back? And so I don't want to put us in a position where now you're scrambling back to figure out how to maintain, because the need's not going to get any smaller. I think that's evident right now, but how we maintain the roles and responsibilities within the department, how we collaborate with other services, all of those things. So I think for me, that's a big concern when it comes to that position.
I understand. I think it's also important right now that we keep in mind that there's, about $1.2 million in assistance to give out, which is not something that we normally have. And it takes a lot of people power to make that happen and to make sure that we're, spending that money wisely and making sure that we're investing in our people.
Thank you. Other members? Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. So, my first question was asked and answered by you about the Human Services Manager, so I'm going a little bit further down the city manager's requests on the second round of funding. I don't know if you have that. I'm on page 3. So, the third line down, Community Mental Health Services, says this project's $442,000. This project will assist Norwich Human Services, specifically the Youth and Family Services Division, to contract several providers, blah, blah, blah. So that 442 is for programs, for contracting for programs, not for somebody to just not spending $442,000 on a person to manage those.
No, so that included a continuation of all the programs that were funded in the first allocation, and it also includes a case manager manager position that ended up in that pot of money the first
Yep.
time.
And then I'm looking, and that's, so that's the, is that the caseworker support in the next line? Continue to fund 2 community caseworkers to administer basic needs.
That is a third one. There were 2 caseworkers funded in one pot of money, which I have hired, and they have been working. They were hired prior to me coming on. And then there was a third one that was funded in a different pot of money that has been, we're in the interview process on, but we've kind of put a hold on it because we only have 1 year of funding, depending what happens with this second round.
So these monies being spent, is this to address that, let's call it a bubble for the next X number of years, for as long as we can fund it with this money, to handle that increased caseload? And we're not talking about scaling up your department by 50% into the, forever.
Yeah, no, unless we have a magical $1 million pot of money for ongoing, which maybe I'll write a really good grant and we will, then no.
Well, and we, it's in our discussions about getting you that grant writer help, right? So
Then yes, if we
Yeah.
can, I've run many programs where, we have $1 million to spend and you have the case management support to do it.
I just want to make sure that we're spending more money on services and programs than we are on adding positions, unless those positions we're adding are people who will be delivering service directly to clients.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for local government to get extremely top-heavy with people who manage and probably do a great job at it, but never actually deal with the people who are in need. And that gets out of balance very quickly, especially when there's a lot of money floating around and a lot of good ideas are presented and you try to do as many as you can and you lose sight of delivering the service.
Yes.
So just so you
Very
know.
hands-on
Yeah.
service delivery.
So I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line down. Funding given in the first disbursement of ARPA funds for the community engagement coordinator and the facility maintainer for just 1 year. Funding is needed for 2 more years to keep the physicians working to meet the rescue plan goals. All makes perfect sense. My question is about the facility maintainer now. If everything goes as the city manager plans, that person's going to be working for Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes, that money will go over.
Okay.
That person goes to Public Works.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Alderman Wilson.
Well, part of my question, I'll wait until Mr. McLaughlin comes up. But I think the other question that I have is, more of a request. Is it possible for you to kind of give us a breakdown of the programs created? And I know the resolution for ARPA 1 kind of has a breakdown as to where the money was supposed to go. Is there a possibility for you to give us a breakdown of what programs were created and the pots of money that was allocated or allotted to them through your office for work and whatnot? And kind of, both the resource amount, but also the salary and benefits amount, so separating them out. And I think part of it is kind of, as President Pro Tem DeLucia alluded to, making sure that we are doing our part to maximize serving the members of the community over just staffing. So I think that would be helpful for us moving forward.
Thank you. Other Questions? Alderman Singh?
So do we currently have any translation services that we provide, or anything, translation services that we provide to our clients, or
So we have-
anything related to being more inclusive about whatever we are doing?
We do have 2 Spanish-speaking staff in our office, and then we use, I'm gonna, see, is it Syracom? Syracom,
Okay.
which is actually pretty amazing. We had someone come into the office with a dialect from an African country that nobody had ever heard of, and they actually had a translator for us to use. It was fascinating.
So that's the annual service that we have to get?
It's, yeah, you call in and you tell them what type of, they have a whole pamphlet of all the different languages that they can find someone to speak to the person. So then you put it on speaker and that person communicates between the case manager and client.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I have one. You mentioned 100 active case file. What percentage of those families are receiving services, and what duration of time are they generally seeing people in the office? And do you have a breakdown on the percentage of those services that are directed towards self-sufficiency?
So all of our services are directed towards self-sufficiency. And part of the reason that there are so many cases is because I feel very strongly about not band-aiding problems and really looking at things holistically when you're sitting with someone and trying our best to empower folks in the community. So our case managers are taking their time and they're going through intensive budgets with folks and helping them identify where they fall short and providing them other resources in the community, connecting them to job training, giving them ideas on how they can manage their budget better. And we're really working to leverage dollars, doing different types of match payment plans. And so when we agree to a service plan, hey, you're going to go and do this, and then we're going to pay this piece for you, it carries the case out a little bit longer because they're going out and they're doing their part of the case plan, and then they're coming back and saying, see, this is what I did, this is what I've accomplished, and then we go and do our part, and it's been an ongoing effort. So I'm very much about, I would love to change the name of our office to the Office of Economic Empowerment, because I think that's an important role that case managers play in people's lives.
Thank you. Is there a rate of recidivism at all that you can point to?
So would you be referring to like people that come back year after year? Probably. I couldn't answer that for you at this moment.
Okay.
I mean, my history of work in social services, there's always that group of folks that just every year end up back in the office.
Can you speak to the, like, maybe top 3 issues as to why?
In general, housing costs, number 1. And I think that's going to be a growing problem here. There's so many folks that pay more than 50% of their income on housing, so there's no money left for other things. And you add in an illness where you're making choices between medication and food or gas and still trying to pay your rent. I'm a big believer in affordable housing having the ability to solve a lot of social problems in the world. That's a whole other soapbox.
Thank you. Next one, John. Please.
The next budget is recreation, and that's on page 112. And again, this is the budget that you'll see various line items have been reduced, mostly for personnel, but there also are operational costs that have been switched to the Public Works Department.
Alderman Wilson, please.
All right, so first, with the switch of staffing to the Public Works Department, and now it's just a recreation, what is kind of the vision now for that department? I'll start there.
We haven't had a lot of time to process this yet, but in my preliminary conversations with Cheryl is that, we have an opportunity to really focus energy on building programs and kind of evaluating, even from like a financial perspective, what programs bring in the revenue, what programs do we want to offset, and have kind of, maybe they can be free, really just play with how the department how the division can be implemented programmatically.
Okay, within this department, there are quite a few requests, and one of them I know dealt with Mopeep and the possibility to renovate the space. Great spot for additional spacing for a department like this. The concern I have is do you think there will be trouble as far as parking and a safe access to the building for the types of programs that may take place there?
I don't know that I can answer that at this moment. I don't know the exact vision of what programs were going to be held there. I do know that both youth and family and rec are in need of additional program space. And we have half of the money already to work on that building. So that is one of my spaces where I wanted to respectfully disagree with John's recommendation. And it would be great to have the other part of the money to address issues in that building and create space.
And the reason I asked that question is I know one of our bigger concerns is, ADA for multiple use or multi-use of a space like that, making sure that, you have an adequate space for a van or a wheelchair, things of that sort. And I know where it is, the kind of location. So, I think for me, that's one of the things I hope as you look at renovating the space and for more utilization of it, that be something to look at. The other questions, keeping kind of with capital projects, is in the budget, or I think it's ARPA, we talk about the Armstrong Courts project. So the additional $195,000 brings you to a total that can get the project complete, yes or no?
That's what I've been told.
So this project with that allocation would be able to be complete. And with the 4 courts, the lights, paving, all of those things.
That is what I've been told. And actually, Public Works, we have a meeting this week. They've actually got a proposal that we're all meeting on for the 2 departments.
Okay. The next project from me on my list is the Fitzgerald's Field. So I did a wonderful ride around where Fitzgerald Field is, and it's in a tricky location. What is your take? Is that an appropriate allocation at this time? What things are you utilize that field? Go ahead.
So that would be the other one that I have to just respectfully disagree with John on. I don't think that is a great place to invest money at this time. There's flooding issues, there's accessibility issues. I personally have traffic concerns trying to get out of there. I don't know if you experienced that. It's a little dangerous. And we, have money in the first allocation to have a master parks plan. So I would imagine that if there's a professional out assessing good use of space, that they're likely to probably draw some of the same conclusions. I think that would be great open space. So I personally would not like to invest money in that field at this time unless the master parks plan came back with some great recommendations. There's some other smaller projects that would be great to finish with that money.
And could you give kind of the follow-up question? What if you would disagree with it, or because I'm not going to lie, I had the same concerns as far as accessibility with the two businesses that it's kind of like in the middle of, and that traffic coming down the hill. If you would put that allocation towards something else, what would it go towards?
There was about 20, it was originally 20,000, I'm going to say 25 now with how everything has gone up, to finish the phase 2 playground next to the Armstrong tennis courts, which included completing the sidewalk for accessibility. I think that would be a great investment because it would be nice to just finish the entire area since we've been investing money into it. That basketball court in the same area, Spain Court, is one of the most used, and there's some resurfacing and repairs to be done there, so that's about 30,000. And to at least address the safety concerns at the skate park. There's a lot of cracks, and it's kind of dangerous at this time. Around 25,000 to redo the base. The original project request that REC put in for the skate park was for a whole big elaborate park, just to at least make the base concrete instead of asphalt and make it safe for the skaters. It's about 25.
And I mean, is it possible that you could send us those
Yep.
figures and project lists as well?
Yep.
And I think that's right now the questions that I have.
Thank you, sir. Other questions, members? Pro Tem, please.
No offense to Alderman Wilson, but I'm going to be a lot more direct. There was a sizable allocation from the ARPA 1 money for projects that we wanted to see move forward in terms of recreation. I would imagine that regardless of how this shakes out based on what the city manager recommended and the things that we have in mind, there'll be another allocation. My concern is, do you have the resources in terms of people with the expertise and people with the time in their current schedule to get these projects underway and then completed in that reasonable person standard of a timely fashion?
So I think that's been a little bit of the challenge in the kickoff, but again, we've got this influx of money and we're all the same people doing the same job, so capacity has been an issue. Leanne Gomes, through her role with the SCOG, has been helping to try and organize some of the rec projects and get them going, so that's been helpful. We've got some meetings with Bob Castronova coming up this week. Pat and I have had some preliminary discussions on how we'll manage projects between the two departments. Again, very preliminary, so I'm confident we're going to be able to get everything going and complete on time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
So kind of keeping with that theme, I mean, I think for me, the other question would be, as far as both capital projects and ARPA projects, and I know, as you said, it's preliminary, but an idea of who would take the lead role as far as that with the staff moving over and things of that sort, and that maintenance schedule and all of those things. I think a better understanding of that is definitely important, and of course, that's more of a conversation between the city manager and the two departments. But I think the bigger concern, kind of echoing President Pro Tem DeLucia, is I know there are several allocations that are more time sensitive than others based on the time of year. So making sure, and kind of like I said with the human service breakdown, is it possible that you send us kind of a status update as to where things are with the recreation projects, where things are going, and kind of next steps with those fundings?
Thank you. Is there further questions? Alderman Gould.
Have we done anything yet at Hamilton Avenue? Any projects at all there?
Is that the youth football field? Is that the
It's the
one?
football
Yes.
field, Hamilton,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, so that is, right now we're working with purchasing to get the light design plan out.
And did we ever do the irrigation over there?
That was complete, yes.
Okay.
And
And,
the field's been expanded. That was one of the things that they worked on. Some fencing has been moved, so, and there's been a lot of brush and tree trimming.
okay. And what have we done at Jenkins Park recently?
Jenkins will have, so they took down the backstop, and the basketball court expansion that's being funded through CDBG is set to start next week, I believe.
But we haven't done anything in the last 6 months over there.
I'm not sure the time frame of the things that were completed. I don't know if you know from the rec advisory committee at all.
So from my understanding is the allocation, I believe, came in September. And we had a meeting in November, I believe, and nothing really has been done as far as work. I know there were plans as far as what to look at. The group has talked about, certain areas to look at, but I think the overall plan was because of the spring, they wanted to make sure that spacing for the basketball court, if lights needed to be added, of course, for the second court, that work kind of commenced before saying we're going to do 1,000 things to the field over there so that we had the space before what they designed.
Thank you.
So I know the court is the first thing that we've discussed because it has to get done before June 30th.
And I honestly would love to have the master park plan before we spend more money on some of these projects. I mean, some things were identified that absolutely needed to be done, but again, I'm working with what was already created. For me, it would be great to have that plan, so we're strategically investing.
Agreed.
Thank you. Just to speak to and I'll get right back to you guys. The community development block grant is paying for that second court. It was originally scheduled for Taffville. The contract had been awarded for Taffville, but there was an interruption and an acknowledgement that it didn't really fit down there. So you speak about strategic planning, so we took a step back. That's how that was then moved back over to Mechanic Street. Speaking about a full master plan, I think that's a very good use of some of those resources. We may be asking too much of all your departments in this area because the expertise for some of this is design or even architectural. And Mr. Casanova has to have really a plan to follow. He can't put a bid out without that background information and particular design. So I just hope members of council agree with that, what I've just said, because I don't think we can just put it on your shoulders here right now tonight. But there's a lot of catch-up to be made, as other members have pointed out, asking for additional dollars in these areas when we haven't used the initial dollars from last year, and we're going into an approval section with this budget. It's difficult to approve more funds on top of those that have not been spent and spent well. But pro tem, please.
Thank you. So, two things. First, and you're a professional, and I know that you know this, but you've been asked for a lot of things tonight, and you've taken notes, and I'm watching you take notes. Please, just keep the city manager, for all these things that you've been asked for, keep the city manager in the loop, because frankly, when I call his office, more often than I will call you directly about, especially like capital projects like this, because the city manager and us talk about how it all fits together in a big puzzle. So I would appreciate it if you would do that. Secondly, the master parks plan has that been initiated? And if so, when should we expect to have a plan?
So Leanne, Bob, and I are meeting on Wednesday to talk about the RFQ.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Wilson, you had your hand up again?
Nope, he asked the question.
Okay. Alderwoman Gould, please.
I meant to ask you this before. What's PREP? It says a ran PREP, a child care program all year for children in virtual school, assisted with homework and schooling.
I could probably answer that one.
With your, Alderman Wilson will respond.
So the PREP program was one of the programs when we were hybrid and remote learning. They worked within the school system because they didn't have the space to run after-school programs or childcare programs. For those kids that weren't going to school, like the Monday and Wednesday, or Monday and Tuesday, or Wednesday, they would be. It was a way for parents to have another childcare setting to send their kid during the day. So that was some of the money they got from some of the first COVID allocations and mixed in with money from the school system.
And where did this take place?
Right in the rec hall. So they did a lot of that in that small recreational room. They had a handful of kids each day. So it was during last school year.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe they were also using that facility to assist with daycare needs in the
Correct.
community when everything else was shut down. Some of those resources went there as well.
Correct.
Which was very needed. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Nice job.
Thank you.
Next budget summary sheet starts on page 94. Thank you, Terry.
If that's 140, what's between that and we'll go right into board. Thank you.
This budget is receiving the transfers from recreation. So you see in the street budget, it's increased from the request by about a little less than 300,000. And that includes personnel and supplies and things like that. So that's why there's a difference in that budget. All the others are pretty straightforward. I'll defer to Pat if he has any opening statements before we take questions.
You want to go by division, John?
Yeah, we'll do that again, yeah.
Yep.
So the first would be streets and park maintenance division. Page 95.
Okay. No, not 94.
No, 94 is this,
Is the overall budget?
yeah, 94 is the summary.
Okay, thank you.
95, right? Yes, I guess the only real difference in the budget is the addition of the 3 rec maintainers into the streets division. We've also, added some positions in some of the other divisions, but that's the only difference. And bringing back the labor, which wasn't funded in the current budget year, that's also included in the proposed budget for streets.
Alderman Wilson?
Good evening. Kind of going along that line, so in addition to the 2 maintainers in this budget and the maintainer supervisor from the rec department, that would be joining your department, there would be an additional maintainer through the ARPA allocations, yes, correct?
For rec, yes.
So there would be, you would have a total of 3 maintainers and a supervisor for that.
Correct. If the ARP funds yeah, I guess those ARP funds were already approved, I guess, for that rec maintainer. I just learned about that on Friday, that additional position.
Okay.
There's 1 year, and we did not fill that position yet.
Okay.
So that will go over.
So, and then the current ARPA allocations is for 1 or 2 years?
So
2
there's
additional
one
years.
in the first, and then the second one, I'm not sure if it's 18 months or 2 years.
18 months, right?
18.
Probably, I think in this case, it was a 2-year extension.
So it's like a total of 26 months, we're talking? 26, 28 months, something of that, around that line?
And Tara, so this position hasn't been filled yet?
Well, it was filled, but then we had an opening in the general fund, so we've been paying that person. So not technically, no.
So there's definitely enough funding through 2024.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you on that clarification, just wanted to know. And the laborer would help with some of the other public work crews, crew work and things of that sort.
Yeah, we've been down a laborer for 2 years now, so it's, it's additional work we can get done.
Perfect. Those are 2 big questions for that division, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Yes, Alderman Singh?
How are you, Bill?
I'm doing good.
Do we think this overtime budget will reduce over the period of time, or?
Well, actually, we've been funding it at 100,000 the last couple of years, which is actually, for an average winter, that wouldn't be enough, really. This past winter was, from a 5-year average, this past winter was still somewhat less than an average, and we spent over 100,000 this year. We got the 2 previous winters, or 3 previous winters, were quite mild. So that overtime budget for streets has gotten reduced from what it used to be. But I'm comfortable, so we only got additional $2,000 for the rec maintainers because evidently they don't work much overtime in the winter. They do most of their work in during the daytime hours because the parks facilities aren't quite as critical as the facility, the public streets and stuff that we clear. So, the $100,000 is what, this year we had to transfer some in from our regular employees account was a little bit underutilized because we had a period of time where we didn't have a fully staffed, we're like in transition, people are leaving, then it takes a month or 2 to fill that position, so there was some extra money in them, so we transferred money from employees over to overtime, but 100,000 is probably on the low end to go into with overtime, but that's what we've been doing, and that's what we can probably accommodate.
And how often we reevaluate all the street signage and stuff? Is it like after 10 years or?
It's not as systematic as maybe it should be. We're trying to do it like when we repave areas, we're trying to upgrade the signs then. So that should be on a 20-year basis maybe. And then other signs as needed as it's brought to our attention.
Okay.
But there are some faded signs out there.
I know.
Keep bringing them to my attention.
All right, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You still have the floor if you need it.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Wilson.
Along the lines of plowing and things of that sort, so now that you have that rec maintenance crew as a part of your staff, would they add to that overall plan of plowing?
Not initially, no. They're in a separate union, and none of them have their CDL licenses. They're not required to get CDLs, although one of the positions, I believe, is supposed to. But two of them, you know, the lower maintainers are not required to have CDLs. So they could assist maybe with some of the sidewalk clearing and things like that with building maintenance, but that would only be, as long as they're in a different union, that would only be after 100% of the Public Works union people are working overtime.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions at this, yes, President Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. Hi, Pat. Good to see you. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the capital projects, because we talked a lot about the ARPA funds and recreation. So overall, is it your vision, or is it loosely called the vision, that the facilities for recreation and their maintenance and their improvement and the capital money spent would fall under your department moving forward?
We haven't actually shaken that out yet, but a lot, I mean, it would seem to make sense.
Okay.
A lot of what we do, even though other departments propose the capital project, like say it's something for 23 Union Street, it may be proposed by another department, but we still kind of end up overseeing it, and we treat them like a client, you know, like they're the owner basically.
Right, and you become the owner's
And we
rep, so
become,
to speak.
yeah, essentially, yeah.
And I understand completely that this is literally, I hate the phrase, but being built while we're flying it. And also that a lot of it is subject to collective bargaining, right? I'm not trying to nail you down on anything, but I'm trying to envision, you know, what this is all going to look like when it's done, if we get it going in the direction that we all agree is in the best interest of the city. For instance, if the rec programs would still fall under Ms. Booker's department, recreation department, and the facilities themselves would be completely overseen by Public Works. Is that kind of where we're trying to go?
That would probably make sense in the perfect world.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And definitely the rec, we have no interest in maintaining, administering programs or reserving fields and things like that. Like, we've had some discussions like, you know, we have calendars. We do reserve the pavilions at the park. So we have a calendar that the admin office puts in and books the pavilions, and then the Parks Division can view that and see when the reservations are for and prepare accordingly, and we generate work orders. Be the same kind of thing with fields. That stuff would be on a calendar that the Recreation Department could infill, and then we would have an ability to read it and see what those upcoming events at the fields are, and we would prepare the fields accordingly, like that.
That makes sense. I'd like to switch gears. And talk a little bit about the parking lot at the Taffville Volunteer Fire Department. Are you familiar with that,
I am.
that need at all?
I am. I'm not sure what the funding is. I don't know if, I don't think it's funded right at the moment.
No, it's not funded, yeah, it's not funded under the capital budget. It's an item for discussion under the ARPA
Yeah.
round two.
It's kind of done a makeshift, now that
Right.
there's less space utilized for basketball. So they've utilized some, millings and stuff to be able to park some more vehicles on a, you might call it a temporary basis.
Sure, but I would say that it's safe to say that it needs to come to a resolution, it needs to come to a conclusion, right? I mean, the situation needs to be rectified. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
So, the concern, well, it's not a concern, the question that I have for you is, in your professional opinion, and again, not trying to stake you down to a number, but, it's a $600,000 ask, and you're right, it didn't get funded under the capital project.
Yeah, I don't think it's a $600,000 project.
Thank you very much, that was the question that I
The
wanted
utility
to ask.
relocation will cost some
That's
money.
the big
Right.
But I haven't seen a breakdown of that exact cost, but that 600,000 seems like a big number for that size of a parking lot, even with the utility relocations.
Yeah, certainly, when you think about $191,000 for tennis courts and parking and lighting, right, and then,
Well, the tennis courts are gonna be a lot more than $190,000 total.
well, yeah, I'm not arguing that, but I'm just saying, you look at that project, and then a project that's just the parking lot, 3 times that amount, that caught my attention, caught a few people's attention. But, so do you think that that is that even though the number might be somewhat lower, that project is within, or somewhere around a $500,000 project said and done? I mean,
I'm not sure how large of a park, if they're gonna go down into the lower level and put more, I'm not sure what their vision is. I've never seen a plan for that $600,000 project, or even a sketch of it.
so let's see if I can paint a picture for you, because I have in my mind, and it's not anything official, this is just me thinking about this. If both of the courts were gone, and the entire area was a parking lot, and we find a new place for the one remaining basketball court, where would you ballpark that project at?
I don't know, I wouldn't be a part of proposing that brand-new basketball court.
Be ripped up.
There'll be a repayment necessary
I
back to the
I think
feds.
you could probably put some parking down lower, on the lower level of that, where how it drops off behind the fire station. I don't know how many cars they need parking for. I mean, is it 40 cars, or is it 60 cars? I mean, that's where you start with. What is the goal here? How many cars are we trying to park? But 600,000 just seems like an awful lot for that.
And I know that we're not going to solve this tonight, but and just taking this opportunity to kind of get my brain around what the scale and the scope and the cost of this project is going to be, because I'd like to actively try to find a way to fund it and have it be
Well,
done.
I guess we can look into trying to work with the chief over there and find out exactly what that need is, and figure out a little better on what those utility relocation costs are going to be, because that is a big part of it.
Sure.
I don't know whether that's 50,000 or 100,000, right there.
It was a substantial number. Personally, I don't think it's a $600,000 project, but it's more than a normal parking lot because of this very expensive relocation of the utilities that are in the way of where it would go. I don't think we've ever specifically discussed how many spots we would get out of that yet, really. We really haven't gotten that far because we haven't funded it. And I don't put a lot of time into something that I'm not going to fund, so.
Thank you, that's helpful. So One more little gear change here, the tennis courts, I went there for a reason. We're going from 6 courts down to 4, that's the current plan?
Current plan was 4 courts, yeah.
And I heard the phrase pre-stressed concrete, and that's going to be the playing surface?
Correct.
Have-
That's what the latest plan was.
And then obviously upgrade the lighting, put the sidewalk in for accessibility. Are we gonna is the plan to pave the parking lot, the dirt parking lot?
Well, that wasn't in the original funding. I don't know, I haven't been really in those meetings, so I don't know. I can, get more on top of that, but
There's additional funding for the parking lot and lighting
great.
that, in ARPA 2.
The latest estimate that the latest estimate I saw was about between 450 and it was over 450,000 for the 4 courts, pre-stressed concrete with the fence around it, did not include the lighting, or anything to do with the parking lots. That was kind of the latest numbers I saw.
And and this may not be a fair question for you, and if the answer's I don't know, then that's okay. But have we spoken with the academy about, because that's their home playing surface, and taking it from, well, I know they're not using it at all right now, but taking it from what was once 6 courts, which is usually standard for, if you're gonna hold a high school meet, you usually have 6 courts going at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know if those discussions have been had or not.
And it went from 6 to 5 because we put the playground in. Now we're talking about 4.
I can answer that.
Great.
I've had discussions with NFA, renewed them this past Friday. We're entering into discussions about the tennis court in earnest with the chairperson of the foundation. That's coming up next. They would prefer 6 as it was, clearly from their programmatic needs. But those discussions are evolving right now, beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but I heard last week that there was a process where you could take the clay base and combine it with other materials and additives, and in other words, not have to extract the clay out, but use it to form a whole new surface. Have you heard anything about that process?
No, doesn't sound like, no, doesn't sound
Okay.
something. The material that's there is underneath the 3 inches or 2 inches of clay has a lot of clay in it itself.
Right.
Like maybe at one time it was like kind of ground up the other courts and they put more clay on top of it or something, because there's an awful lot of fines in the material below the clay. To the extent that you'd need to replace that material with probably a foot of processed gravel.
I'll keep everyone informed as it goes forward. Rapidly, I hope. Yeah.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Kind of keeping along with that project, talking possible 6 courts, does that, and I don't know if you could answer this question. It's probably more of a question that Tara probably could answer. Going to 6 courts, does that then affect the playground area or an expansion of a playground area?
Yes,
It would.
I think it would.
Changes the entire plan.
Okay.
That's right.
And quotes and everything that has been put together is based on 4.
And the reason I asked that question, I know we had this discussion in Rec Advisory, because they have the tennis committee, that the project for probably the last year has been an outlook of 4. I mean, to me, it was a little bit of a surprise we're talking 6 again, because we have members that were from the NFA community that have been a part of those discussions since the inception of that committee over 2 years ago. So I think that's a big head scratcher for me, that we're now talking 6 when we've been having discussion about 4 for a while.
That's a preference. That's not necessarily what, they accept or would help support. there are members in the community who want the 6 back. I've been getting the phone calls, you've probably got a few of them
Yep.
yourself. But
Well, and
being realistic, I think where we are now is where it will end up.
correct, and that's the only reason I'm kind of a little confused, because of course it's a project we want to get done. And, you know, I don't want us to continue to have to keep going back and forth, whether it's 6 or 4, and the costs continue to rise when we're trying to get this project done. It's been over 2 years at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions at this portion? Oh, Alderman Wilson.
Well, I'll ask the question now. I mean, we've been talking about some of the ARPA allocations, and you have quite a few when it comes to drainage work and things of that sort. Do you plan on having a lot of this work kind of, any work in-house done as far as some of these projects, or is this more of coming up with a design, working with individuals, and it being a much larger project?
That would probably be the way to do it with the dollar amounts that we're talking.
Okay.
I mean, there might be some little parts of it that we could do in-house, but the majority of it would be done with a design firm and then bidding it out.
And the follow-up question to that would be, even though there are these funds, would you be anticipating possible FEMA funds or other funds to help with some of these projects in some of these areas that have been mentioned that have really been hit hard over the last year or so with some of the major storms?
That's a possibility with FEMA funds maybe, but the FEMA funds we're finding, it takes forever. We submitted a grant 15 months ago for a study to remove the Upper Falls Dam. And I'm being told that it looks like we got approval for it, but they're not, they haven't written the approval letter yet, not 15 months ago when we applied for the funds. So, I mean, FEMA just takes a long, long time.
And then kind of my last ask, I know last time you guys were working with Uncas Leap, the Uncas Leap project, and kind of like where are we when it comes to that project as a phasing and whatnot?
So back in the fall, we solicited proposals. We only actually got one proposal, but it was from the company that had done the master plan originally.
Okay.
I don't know if other companies thought, oh, it's a shoo-in to give it to them, so they didn't apply or they didn't submit anything, but we did get a proposal from them. We worked out an agreement, and they're doing the design work on that now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Singh.
I just actually have a quick thing. The thing which is bothering me is between that 4 and 6 tennis courts. Is there a way to just make the plan so there is room for expansion for future? Because the reason that they gave was kids wants to get free early, so they're not staying that long. But I don't want to delay the project in any way either,
The playground equipment is built where that tennis court used to be. So, I don't know. It's just the first I've heard of going back to 6, but.
The committee had agreed on 4.
Okay.
Everybody's been going with 4. The plans are all built around 4. We're investing money in a parking lot, and lighting, and playgrounds, and it's going to take the whole space.
Okay. It's just a lot of community members, seems like they didn't give the input to the committees at the proper timing.
Well,
Right.
I haven't been here, but I can say that it appears that the tennis committee has been holding public meetings for several years on this.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Norendorf, please.
So we're talking about this playground equipment and the 6 courts. If it did come down to 6 courts being developed, how easily would it be to relocate that equipment?
I guess it wouldn't be impossible, it's not that hard to, I wasn't there witnessing it when they installed it, but, you know, it's probably got some concrete base, you know, poured around the pieces and, you know, it could be moved out. Not impossible, it's not all that much equipment, actually, it's a pretty small little playground. But that would, I mean, yeah, like Tara said, it's been going for 4 courts for quite a while now, and they've been having public meetings on it, so I'm not sure at this point, changing it to 6 would be such a good idea. I don't know. That's my
I'm
humble.
not sure where we would move the playground to then, also.
Right, we've already built the playground.
And it's,
Yeah.
they can't use it,
The four courts meet the recreational needs of the city. The extra courts are allegedly for NFA use, and that really was not part of the dialogue until very recently. And we've been proceeding on the basis of 4.
I don't know if they're planning to fund it or not. I mean, if they're planning to.
Well, absolutely, if we were to do that, and I'm not recommending it at this point, they would have to fund it. We're not going to fund, subsidize something that we don't need as a recreational component at this point. The four courts are adequate for recreational demand that we have for tennis.
President Pro Tem, please.
I just want to be clear. I was not slamming the brakes on this project
No,
and
I know
saying,
you
oh, it
weren't.
needs to be 6. I'm saying I got asked the question, and so I conveyed the question, then, and all my question was the academy consulted, and apparently they've been in contact with the mayor, and they've had input, the academy has had input, and I'm satisfied. I'm not asking you to change the project.
I mean, we did have a gentleman that was associated with tennis come to the city council, I think 2 sessions ago, and plead his case for 6. That's kind of where I saw it being focused.
Alderman Wilson.
And the other good part about this entire tennis project is the athletic director for Norwich Free Academy, Roy Wentworth, is a member of the tennis committee. So the communication is double there because they also have a representative on the actual tennis committee.
Thank you. Other questions at this point? Alderwoman Gould.
Okay, let's move on from tennis.
Let's play something else.
Lower Broadway sidewalk expansion. Where are we thinking about putting more sidewalks or expanding the sidewalks on Lower Broadway?
So, that basically, the proposal that's, was in the ARP funding was for the, you know, around Billy Wilson's area, you know, that, now, we're gonna be creating another proposal for Joe Courtney's earmark projects to do even more out there. But that was gonna be to do some angled parking and some extra wide sidewalks in certain areas, bump outs around that northern part of Lower Broadway, was what that money in the ARP was for. But now that project may take on a whole new life and become a bigger thing, the whole Lower Broadway street, and maybe even some traffic changes on Bath Street.
And the triangle.
And that, the piece between Bath and, the triangle between Bath and,
That's a much, if I may, that's a much larger project. That's in the final stages of being proposed. It has to be completed by, believe it or not, April 15th, Friday. And so we're really working on the fly on that. It would be much more extensive than what we have in the budget, like to the tune of many times the amount. It really would be redoing Lower Broadway from the even the open space next to the former bank, parking, lighting, utilizing the triangle spot that's on Bath and Broadway.
Changes to Bath Street, too.
Yeah, and changes configuration of Bath, making it two ways, so they would have, you would really bypass that as a thoroughfare. So there's lots to go in with that April 15th. We're not assured of getting that at all, so we have a much more modest approach, which is the capital budget.
Well, the ARP budget.
Right, I'm sorry, ARP.
Okay. But for what is it proposed in the ARP budget, the $150,000? We're looking at the area right adjacent to Billy Wilson's?
Yeah, from the corner down past that building, so all those buildings along.
Yeah, to the entrance to the bank parking.
Parking garage.
Okay, we're talking about widening,
Widening the sidewalk some, maybe creating some angled parking also, a couple spaces.
and getting rid of those Jersey barriers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'll wait until we get to the next division for the rest of my questions.
It may also include use of the property above 59 Broadway, which right now is the fenced area owned by the city itself, whether that would be a deck or some other use that would provide for public access on that site, where you might shift the outside dining, which is now in the road, over to that corner. I mean, those are some of the concepts, but we were only given 2 weeks to get the submission in, which is due the 15th. I mean, that's literally what we were told.
Yeah, it's a pretty ambitious proposal, and we're being helped by Kevin Brown of NCDC to kind of help spearhead it, and we're utilizing some of the expertise that NCDC has hired to do some of the work on the code updates and things. We're using them through Kevin to give us some numbers too, so.
Okay.
It's a little hands-on deck thing at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Singh.
Just a quick one. So, of course, the ARP allocations we see separately, they are not in this budget book, right? Where is the state funding for like sidewalks and stuff that we got, like $600,000? Does that show in where?
Doesn't show in the budget, no. It's a separate standalone project with another source of funding, so I don't think
Okay.
you'll list that in the budget, right?
Okay.
Thank you. Another division?
Certainly.
Yeah, next would be engineering administrative.
So there's a change proposed there. We're looking to add the environmental compliance coordinator. In fact, so you all probably got an email that I sent out kind of explaining what that position was last Friday. It's being funded with mostly from money with the NIP, the bottle bill change, where now there's a charge to NIPS. It's not a returnable deposit. They just charge people, I guess, 5 cents for the NIPS, and then that money goes back to the municipality in which they're sold. So Norwich is going to get a good share of money for that. And one of the actual legislation actually suggested that the cities use them for positions such as recycling coordinators and that type of activity. So this is going to be like a recycling coordinator on steroids. Besides doing recycling coordination, they're going to help with some of the other environmental compliance, these non-funded state mandates such as the MS4 program, and then some of the other environmental work that we do within the department, such as making sure our separator, oil water separator tanks get pumped out regularly, and doing the post-closure monitoring at the landfill and the industrial stormwater permitting. They're going to help oversee that work, taking some stuff that the engineers have to spend time on now, or myself. I spend time on that myself.
we'll have a better idea about what the revenue stream is. I think I mentioned it when I was doing my budget overview. The first allotment of revenue from the state will be coming in April, I believe, right, Josh?
Right, for the first 6 months that the NIP taxes existed.
You know, and it should be a fairly good indicator of what we think we'll get annually.
So that's essentially the only change really to the engineering and admin division.
Thank you, Alderman Singh.
And you had a similar position before?
Yeah, about
Right.
4 years ago. it was
4 years ago.
Maybe 5, I don't know. But we had a recycling coordinator, and they actually did help out with some of those other environmental things.
And then we just cut due to budget constraints?
Yeah, it got cut for budget constraints.
So we're not really adding a position, we're trying to revive the
Nope, that
position
cubicle's
that we
still
had.
there in our office. You know,
Okay.
we'll have to get a new computer now, but, yeah.
Hope springs
It was a
eternal.
position that was there.
Thank you.
Thank
think
you.
this
Other
could work.
questions on this division? Next.
Okay, fleet maintenance.
Okay, fleet maintenance, the change there doesn't really show up in the budget because that is being funded through the ARP funds, but there is an additional, I had requested an additional mechanic, and that is being funded with ARP. We did increase the supplies account, in that has, you know, it says in the request, you know, that I didn't really request it, but I thought I had, but then we have to do these budgets so early back in September, then it's like after that we learn, oh, the cost of these supplies has skyrocketed. And that's why we're gonna need more money for supplies, because vehicle parts, I don't know if you bought any parts or had work done on your cars, but I just paid $150 for tires on a car that are not very big.
I know that feeling.
So, I mean, but parts for vehicles are extremely expensive, so that does show an increase there. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same within that division. We certainly can use the mechanic that they're put forth with the ARP funds.
Frankly, if I didn't have ARPA money, I would have probably budgeted for it in general fund. It's, the volume of work has gone up quite a bit, more complex, just the nature of what they do. And, you know, we do all in-house, so all public safety equipment, with the exception of some real specialized pumps and things in fire apparatus, but mostly we do everything, which is a big savings. A lot of municipalities send it out for repair.
Police cars in particular, we spend a lot of time working on police vehicles.
Yeah, they take a lot of wear and tear.
Alderwoman Gould.
Which brings me, like a beautiful segue from the city manager. The police department, and I'm just looking for, in the capital budget, has asked for, just want to get it right. Is it $60,000?
For the
think they asked for
For the rig? Yeah, it's 60 grand.
$60,000 for
Armor, right?
the armored vehicle. Who's going to work on that?
That's going to be outsourced. Our guys are not going to work on that from what I, you know, I've had that conversation with the city manager.
Okay. And the vehicle washing bay that we put in, how's that? Is that being utilized?
Oh, yeah. That's being utilized about what we anticipated. The police use it a lot. We use it a lot. You know, NPU uses it. It's utilized quite well, but by the same token, we don't want to overutilize it because that changes, depending on the usage of it, it could change the permitting status too. So right now, we use it for about the amount that we were expecting to use it, and we're well within our permit. We try to run it 24/7 like a commercial car wash. We're not going to meet the terms of our permit.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wilson, please.
Kind of going back to one thing that Alderwoman Gould brought up about the armored vehicle. Although it's being outsourced, the service would be outsourced. Down the line, it would be our mechanics that would be fixing things, or would it always be outsourced to fix any item on it?
My understanding is it would pretty much always be outsourced.
Okay.
Thank you. Members? Alderman Singh?
So all the vehicles that we are adding, we are getting in capital budget, right? Are we also unloading some of the old vehicles? Are we selling those, or these are just addition to what we have?
In general, I would say yes, we get rid of, I know with the plow trucks, we will be getting rid of some of those older trucks. With the truck 30, the stake body truck, we'll definitely be getting rid of that. That's 25 years old. Police cars, I'm quite sure they trade them in, they get rid of those. I'm not sure, the senior center, I think there's a senior center bus in there or something.
Van,
yeah. Can't speak to that. But in general, we do, when we replace vehicles, we do get rid of the old ones.
Okay. And the plow trucks that we are getting, are they natural gas or regular fuel?
They're regular fuel,
Diesel.
diesel.
Okay,
We didn't have good success with the natural gas trucks.
okay. Thank you.
As far as the tanks, they'd have to be refueled more often than a diesel truck. And it didn't seem to have the power.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully someday we'll have electric trucks that are,
They coming.
yeah,
They're
they're coming,
coming.
that are, quite powerful.
Okay, the next is on the same page. It's fleet maintenance, it's refuse and recycling. This is our solid waste collection services and our disposal services.
Yeah, so we've been collecting more trash in the city in the last year and a half. Things went way down at the beginning of the pandemic, and then they've gone up quite substantially, especially in Norwich, more so than some of the surrounding towns, which has increased our costs at the incinerator. It's because there were a lot more vacant buildings, I think, before, and now more of the buildings are being utilized, and so they're generating more trash, so.
Yeah, it's by the ton, so every extra ton is additional. It coincides, and I've been doing this a long time, when you have a recession, refuse tonnage goes down, and when you have growth, the refuse goes up. It really ties very closely to that. So it's good news and bad news. It's bad news because we're spending more on it. It's good news because it's reflecting in more growth in business. Or people buying appliances, things like that. It's a whole kind of circular type of situation.
could it be because they were home during the pandemic and cleaning out their house and saying, we don't need this anymore?
They have extra money because they didn't go on a trip or whatever, and they bought the new refrigerator or whatever.
And more gatherings now.
Yeah.
Questions? Pat, I have a concern. Truck traffic on Holland Road from, in this case, the Wheelabrator facility. And then
Which road?
Holland Road, 169. There's concern of the taxpayers out there. I heard it clearly, very loudly last fall, speed, volume. All our waste is going where at this point in time? Because there was discussion with the Wheelabrator, a better rate versus Scarra and Preston.
Well,
How did that all factor out?
So SCARA controls where the member municipalities go. We have an agreement with SCARA that we re-signed, about 18 months ago or so, all of Scarra's trash, 100% of it, all the towns that make up Scarra, our trash now goes to Lisbon, the
Right.
Wheelabrator. So all trash generated in Norwich is supposed to be going there.
Which the concern is what created that, I guess, the truck traffic and the pace at which they come down
Well, there
there.
must be, I can't speak to that, but some of the trucks must take other routes. I'm not sure if it's all trash trucks that are going there.
No, there's other large employer creating some of the concern as well, larger trucks. But in fact, they recently installed a speed sign in that area. If you're coming down Holland Road, the sign lights up, tells exactly how fast you're going. Whether you're above or below the speed limit, you're now given notice. So I anticipate greater enforcement there as well. But are we seeing the savings that we were hoping for? Or has the change with COVID and everything else kind of erased any of those hopes?
The savings with the
Well, we went to Wheelabrator
Oh, yeah,
for
no.
contract savings.
Yeah, we're getting we have quite a great rate from Wheelabrator, in the like $72 a ton versus the towns if you've read the papers, the towns in the central part of the state are paying $100 a ton. So the Scarra towns, are really kind of, have a better deal than pretty much anywhere else in the state.
In the towns in the Hartford County and other areas, can you tell us whether or not that waste is finding its way in eastern Connecticut?
Some of it is, I guess, not a lot of it. Some of it's going to Preston now, but a lot of it's, most of it's being trucked out of state to like Pennsylvania, or rail cars. That's the next, what they're going to be doing, taking rail cars, but most of that's going out of state because of the problems with the incinerator in Hartford.
Oh, yeah.
It's a terrible solution, but luckily, we're not doing it. Our waste energy plant is more modern and more efficient. The one that they relied on in the Mid-Connecticut project was very old and a conversion from used to be CL&P power plant, and so it never really worked well for them.
So we have another 8 years with Lisbon, but we're already looking ahead to what's next after that?
You're forecasting good.
Because the cost is going to be going up.
Well, fuel certainly is. Yep. Any questions more on this division? Nope. We're set?
The final division is building maintenance. Oh, actually, there's parking maintenance too, but very small.
They're both pretty much status quo, both of these last page.
Any questions from members? Thank you. Appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you, Pat.
No more questions on capital. Thank you for the purchase of the bucket truck there a few months ago, approving that. We're putting that to good use.
Thanks, Pat.
Your Honor. Our final budget out of city services is planning and neighborhood services, and that is on what page?
68.
Which one?
68. In my book, I don't know online if
It's
it's,
same thing.
68?
yep.
Good evening.
Okay, I'll defer to Deanne if she has any opening remarks, and then we'll take any questions you might have.
So the budget hasn't changed drastically. As you know, we've had some shortages in staffing, so that's been a little tricky. So what I have done, if you look at some of the numbers here and the employees, is I'm going to start with the assistant planner position. I'm proposing to create the city planner position and eliminate the assistant planner position this year. Our assistant planner currently is certified as an American Institute of Certified Planners, which is the highest credentials in our field. And he's also a transportation planner and a wetlands agent. And I think that that position should be elevated to the city planner position. And it's also a succession plan for the department, working very closely with the existing assistant planner. So you'd see that we have proposed to eliminate the assistant planner position in the budget and elevate that to the city planner position. We still have one building official, 2 assistant building official positions. Right now, both are vacant. We have a temporary building official that's working 18 hours a week for us, and we have someone that's doing code review for us. He's doing building plan review for us, and we are going out to having on-call building officials to do those call-ins from the fire departments until we have 2 assistant building officials. An offer was made last week to fill out the assistant building official. We had one qualified candidate offered the position, and he was offered 3 jobs the same day. So, it's a real shortage out there. So we are moving forward. I still want to budget for those positions. However, we have created a position called Air Building Code Compliance Tech, which we have as 0 positions right now, but that is a position where we can work with someone coming in on a lower licensing that can maybe have a license doing inspections in plumbing or electrical or plan review, get them trained in at a lower position, get them moved up, we have them do training, and then we would have a step that they could get a little bit higher increase until they can get that license and assistant building official, because that's what we really need is those building official licenses. But we're in such competition with other communities. So staffing is pretty much the same, 2 admin staff. Our office is functioning really well with the OpenGov program. We opened it up about a month ago as a trial to see how it's going, sort of a soft opening, and people seem to be really receptive of it, especially the contractors. They like not having to come into the office, and so that is helping our admin to be able to do more work that we want them to do on other tasks. So the staffing is the same, but I think the focus of what they're working on will be a higher quality of work that they're doing. So the blight position right now is open, but we're going to be filling that blight housing code as well. And in the budget this past year, in the ARP monies was the assistant zoning and assistant blight officer that came out of ARPA monies, and that is proposed again as ARPA funds. So right now, our staffing is pretty much the same. That was the only new position that was funded through the ARPA funds, was that assistant to the zoning agent and assistant to blight. Still important for the zoning agent and blight agent, because that they both have a really heavy workload for a city. Where if you see that our, this year's projected numbers are somewhat high in the seasonal temporary employees, because we've been moving money from the regular employee line, moving it around to fill that gap up. So as far as budgeting, we've been doing really well in the office, but we've just been having to move some monies around to cover some of those outsourcing. There's nothing else I can really think of that's jumping out at me. The only thing I would say, one other thing, is under professional services, we've been budgeted $14,000 a year, which has been we need consultants for different projects and things, and that money has been used, not necessarily all $14,000, but it's been great to have that in there. We are working on the plan of conservation and development this year, and it needs to be adopted by 2023. So in the summer of 2023, we would like to have $50,000 on top of that. 14 is what was originally requested. The city spent $100,000 10 years ago on that, and we think with the 2 planners in the office that we can do a pretty good job of doing many of those tasks, but there's certain things that we do need someone to help us with, some demographics, things that are beyond our regular everyday work that we do. $30,000 was put in there, which we are really appreciative for that. We are going to go out to RFQ. We've been working with the finance department, with Bob Castronova, to send out a request for qualifications to see what maybe numbers and how much interest we'd have to assist us. But I've been calling around to other communities, and I'm finding that the tasks that we want done are running for about $40,000 to $50,000. So that would be the only item that I would like to see increase that's not in the proposed budget, is just going up another 20 there. Otherwise, not a whole lot of other requests for this office.
Alderman Singh.
So the $14,000 that I guess we are seeking, is that for like a plan review, like third-party plan review?
No, so it's for the plan of conservation and development. So what we do is we want to use an outside consultant that does that last check to make sure that we meet all the statutory requirements, some of the demographic information we have. When the plan was done 10 years ago, it was done with some help of planometrics, and they did a great job. We don't have that format necessarily of how they did it, so some of that helping from a consultant to just put it together. We can do all the background work internally. We can have the scoping meetings ourselves. We think we have the talent and scope to do that, but we need someone, a professional outside source that we can have them do that. And I think that that's going to run between $40,000 and $50,000. But I don't want to use all of the money in here if we're down to $30,000. If we have another project that we need a consultant for, and we've already allocated the 30 to the POCD, which I don't think is quite enough. But we wouldn't have any other for any outside consultants if we had some specific need for a consultant in the office, and we've had in the past needs for consultants.
Now with shortage of help, are we still using third-party review companies?
Are we using third, yeah, for plan,
Right,
for like
for
building
plan reviews and
officials? You're saying for building officials?
Yeah.
Yep, we are doing that. Some house plans, some decks, some things like that. Especially if it's the same house plan, if someone's, that's really helpful. If they've done the third party review, done that with the consultant, we know that exact same plan has been reviewed before. It makes it easier for us to just get that through because we already have those comments and it's been corrected. So yeah, we are outsourcing some of that right now because the building officials that we have, Dan Coley, and the consultant that we're using, which his name is Earl Dean, and he taught building officials, so he's very qualified. He's excellent. But he's only 18 hours a week. He's going to fill in next week full-time because Dan's on vacation. We really need them to do inspections and permitting because they're both qualified to do permitting inspections, and we need just the plan review outsourced right now.
So for inspection, are we trying to move towards more technological approach, or is still gonna be like in person? Because of course, one person cannot be at 50 places.
It depends. If we have the staffing needs that we have, we can do it internal. So if we can fill those assistant positions or if we can't find those assistant building officials, if we get someone that's qualified and has plan review certification from the state of Connecticut, we can possibly get that person in under that building code compliance tech, and they can really just focus on doing plan review. So we're really trying to be as flexible as we can of how we can do these positions and what we're outsourcing. Using the highest and best skills of the people we have. And again, inspections, I would rather have our staff, city staff, do inspections as much as possible because people are familiar with them. They're, city employees than having that stuff outsourced.
But are we still using technology for inspections, like pictures or video,
Yep,
FaceTime?
we're doing that, and we did that during COVID too, so if people, if it's something simple that we can take photographs of, or they can call them and they can, do it live over their phone or iPad, we still are doing that for convenience for people too, so, and it saves us the time to go out there. Yeah, we're doing some of that still.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
Good evening. First, I want to say, as always, thank you for kind of being innovative. I mean, again, we sit here and the struggle of making sure you can find individuals to do the work. And I think the building code compliance tech concept, I think, is a smart one to utilize. I see it's something that's not funded within the budget. But the request and the explanation makes sense. I think when you look at that position, is it a way where then that person, through your office, through both the experience and whatever courses and things that they have to take to get certified, Is it a way that kind of adding to that succession plan of someone moving into another phase?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I will tell you, our greatest need, though, is someone who's licensed right now. I
Yeah,
mean,
correct,
because
correct.
when you're short and you have one building official and, outsourcing a temp, to train that other person, to kind of watch them, because they need that. They will need that instruction. That's just taking more time away. So that is the goal. And even if I had one more assistant building official, then we really could do it with that, one assistant building official, the building official, and then that lower level, because we'd have two people to help with that training. But when you only have one building official right now, that's not that's not the best choice for our office, to have one other person that's training.
And so the other question that I have, and I think I ask it every year, is what is it that, besides the shortage, what is it that you think is the issue with getting individuals in that position? Is it salary, compared to other places? What is
Well,
it?
there's definitely building officials are aging out in Connecticut, and they're not getting them coming up as quickly. So I have talked to Kathy Austin about this and hope that the trade schools, the state trade schools, can start getting some programs that are specifically, working with people getting into the building official kind of inspection type trades. But I will say that, we've done sort of a survey with HR, a little bit of the salaries. We're about right, maybe a little low, but we have great benefits. And so that's the whole thing, we have the pension and we have great insurance plans. So, and I do make sure that I let them know that, it's like, they're comparing just total dollar to dollar, but there's no pension or they don't have great insurance. It's like, I always make sure that they know that. And so it's important. So I don't know, what towns are starting to offer sign-in bonuses. So that is now a competitive thing, is, they're getting sign-on bonuses. So we've talked a little bit with HR about, is that something that we could potentially do just for like the higher positions, like those building official positions, and how would that work? Would they get that after the probationary period is done, is how I would look at it, and then a commitment to stay 2 years or a year, depending on what that is, so we know we're not rehiring in a year again and doing this again. So I'm not even sure if this is feasible. We haven't really spent a lot of time on it. We're just in those very, very initial conversations, and they started last week. And it was because we're having such a difficult time, and other communities are now throwing the sign-in bonuses out. So I will say that NCDC, they mentioned earlier, has, through their leading edge that they're working with their code correction and their revitalization money, they have some building officials through their team that we can utilize. I'm looking to potentially utilize them if we have like the major projects like Hale Mill and I don't have staff, or Panema's going, we're going to have to do that. Unfortunately, that rate is pretty high. So, the preference is really to have staff that I can, that I know that we can grow and stay with us and not pay just that fee. But we have to do what we have to do to get these projects and economic development booming in the city. So we'll do what we have to.
Thank you.
Other questions? Just a quick one. The analysis on the waterfront, phase 2, from the environmental perspective, where does that report sit?
The phase 2 environmental, excuse me, you're talking about,
Marina.
excuse me?
Marina.
The marina. I can follow up and find out where we are with that. I'm sorry, I can check with Time Bond. They have the contract with that. So, and those are those kind of things that we're talking about when you have other consultants. That wasn't paid out of our department budget, but like Business Park North, we're going to be using a planning consultant to review that because of the involvement from an ethical standpoint of me involving that and having the relationship with the council and the zoning tie-in on that. So just stepping back and having an outside planner review that outside of our office. Wetlands is pretty clear cut on something like that. So wetlands is not our opinion on things, so we feel that it's important. So that's a consultant fee that we have to pay to someone else to outsource that. And that's because the city has money in the project and has a stake in the game. If the city didn't have a stake in the game, it wouldn't be necessarily a potential conflict or appearance of a potential conflict, and that's why we always want to be there. So that buffer of having some money in that consultant line for professional service is really helpful if we know something comes up and that we need that.
And last thing, the historic assessment of the buildings on Shipping Street.
Yep, so that, the historic inventory of historic properties was finished by Regan Minor at the end of March, and it was sent to the state of Connecticut to take a peek at that to see if they had any comments before it comes to the council. I'm meeting with Regan next week, and they had a couple tweaks that they wanted her to add into her review. And we're going to look at it next week, and hopefully I'll have something before the council. And this is a local historic inventory of properties. And it's not every property in the city, and it's ones that are impacted by special flood hazard areas so that they can take advantage of those historic exemptions. And so we will be presenting that to the council in your time frame, but I will get that done soon.
Thank you much. Members, anything else?
Just a quick one.
Please.
So do you think like we have a new now platform to file permits and all that, right? Of course, that's helping, like you said, but do you think there's further investment needs to be made in technology field? So if we have less people on ground, we can still handle the workload.
I think what we have right now is great, and the officials really like it. There's a time period where we're still learning it, and so I can't really give you an answer if it's something beyond that. I think we still need to learn that technology, but it seems to be working internally really well for reviews within departments, which is like MPU and the city being connected to do reviews, and that's been really helpful in the fire marshals. As far as any other way to use technology to be more efficient, I think we're doing the best we can right now. People coming in, we're still taking a lot of precautions as far as things that we learned during COVID. So when we're at the counter, our admin, everything's on a screen. They can see it on the outside, so there's not as many people coming into our office, and they can visually see what we're looking at. We're providing, we have a monitor that provides information about how to get permits. We update our website really frequently now and make those changes. So I think we're embracing technology and being as efficient as we can, but I don't see anything right now that I feel that we need necessarily.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? We're all set. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Welcome our Board of Education representatives, starting with our superintendent, chair, and our business agent as well, and members of board who are out in the audience. We're about 15 minutes behind. I apologize for that, but the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Nystrom, President Pro Tem DeLucia, members of the City Council, and our Board of Ed members, Manager Solomon, and community members. I'm Dr. Kristen Stringfellow. I'm the superintendent of the Norwich Public Schools. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening in person. It feels pretty wonderful to be able to greet you personally, along with my colleague Bob Serpensky, who is our business administrator, and Chairman Robert Aldi, who's the chairman of the Board of Education, to this evening present the Board of Education fiscal year 2022-23 budget summary. I was hired as superintendent in July of 2019, and at that time, there were two major goals or essential elements of my position. They were to audit our financial systems and business practices and try to bring the district out of years of fiscal deficit. Another goal was to partner more effectively with the city. And I'm very proud to be a part of this partnership that we have forged together over the last few years. I believe that we have mutual respect for each other, and we've built trust by being honest and fair in our collective interactions. As just a high-level summary, the school department created a fiscally responsible budget, and the Board of Education voted on March 8th to approve the 2022-23 Norwich Public Schools proposed budget. We sent the city manager a request in the amount equivalent to approximately a 2.32% increase to our budget. Within the budget that you have in front of you, there are fixed costs with increases for high school tuition that, as you know, comprises a significant share of our local budget. We have obligations to our 8 collective bargaining unit groups and increases in many other expenditure line items. And Bob will describe those in more detail for you this evening. At the last Norwich City Council meeting, the city manager recommended not to honor the 2.32% increase, but instead recommended a 1.03% increase. We are here tonight as partners. We understand that the Board of Education is not a standalone, is not a silo. We understand that much like the high school tuitions, representing a significant amount of our public school budget, the public school pre-K through 8 system represents a significant amount of the City of Norwich budget. And although we have not yet had the opportunity to discuss this topic as a full board since March 8th, we do have a meeting tomorrow, we will certainly try our best to continue that productive partnership with the city. As you know, we have made significant renovations and revisions to our organization, management, and staffing structure in the school department. We believe that's contributing positively to our ability to remain out of deficit, and we continue to find efficiencies while we build a more effective school department. We understand that community members and taxpayers are suffering. The pandemic brought illness, loss, isolation, financial instability, and distress to the people within the City of Norwich and in all places in our state and country. We want to do everything that we can to help lessen the impact of the city budget on the taxpayers and the community of Norwich without compromising the education of our children, and we know that you feel the same. We are committed to creatively brainstorming with you and working with City Manager Solomon and the council to that end. We brought some handouts for you this evening. They were emailed earlier today. Bob will walk you through the details of our budget, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have for us tonight. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. As Dr. Stringfellow said, the handouts were emailed out today, and I'm assuming not everyone had time to print them or read them. There were 3 or 4 items. I'm going to speak from the landscape one that has numbers on it. The other handouts are for just background information related to ECS, the Alliance grant, and the governor's budget. I was asked to keep the presentation to 10 to 15 slides, so I did the best I could. It's 16 slides, but I'm not going to talk in detail about every one, so that kind of balances things out. I've been here a year now. First time I came before the city council was last budget season, and I had been on the job a week. So I think I know more than I did then, and hopefully I'll be able to answer questions better than I could a year ago. So I'll get started. I do echo every thought and word that Dr. Stringfellow said. I think we're going in a good direction. I know I have a good working relationship with Josh, and we often meet and talk about quite a few things. I think the budget process that we have in place is a sound one. We started actually working on the budget in the early fall. We had a series of 3 in-depth budget subcommittee meetings, and unlike a lot of Board of Educations, it's not a 2 or 3 member committee that then goes and back and reports to the full board. It's the full board comes to the meetings. And also, 2 of the city council members, Alderman Gould and Alderman Wilson, come and attend. And I think that's valuable input. The questions raised by both the council members and the Board of Education gets us focused in a direction so we're better prepared to answer questions, and we're in a better place tonight. I came to the city manager's budget presentation last Monday, and I saw that John Solomon recommended a 2.5% increase over what he called the adjusted budget number. In retrospect, looking at that, I fully understand what he's basing that on, and if I were the city manager, I probably would have made the exact recommendation, so I have no problem with him coming up with a 2.5 recommendation. With that said, the difference between the budget he's recommended and the budget that the Board of Ed approved is literally the $1 million question in the room. The difference is 1.1 million. So the question is, can it be done? Can we meet that budget without impacting the needs of the district, the educational system of the school? Now, as Dr. Stringfellow said, the budget we put forward is a reasonable budget. It's based on a lot of input. From my perspective, there's no fluff in the budget. So it's needs-based, so what do we do? Where do we go from here? So we haven't had a chance to address this with the full board. I'm sure we'll start that conversation tonight, so I might be, I don't want to speak out of school, but I might be saying things that the full board has not had a chance to digest, so keep in mind it's my thoughts only, and I'll try to be cognizant of that. So with that said, I'd like to get started with the first sheet. As you recall, the bottom line is the adjusted budget. How did that come about? Last April, May, we had some uncertainty. Where would this Alliance ECS portion increase come? We've all learned a lot since then, and the ECS allotment to cities is fixed and won't change, so any increases in ECS going forward will roll into the Alliance grant. That's a given now, and we all know that. So at the 11th hour, the city was faced with a dilemma. They had to reduce, I believe it was over $3 million citywide, and the Board of Ed's share was $1,240,000. So the City Council approved the budget as was, and the expected revenue was left in on the ECS thing, and Dr. Stringfall and I made a pledge that we would not spend that money.
We might have like done that in blood.
Yes,
if
I think-
remember.
I think you did.
There were certain people that required blood, and we swore to it, so. All kidding aside, we did set up a separate line item in the budget, and if you look at our monthly budget report to the board, I didn't know what to call it, so I called it ECS Alliance Grant Adjustment. And as a single line item, budgeted at $1,240,000, and to this date, we have honored that commitment and have not spent a penny of it, and we do not intend to. So it's pretty much 100% certainty unless sky falls, and at a minimum, that's what will be returned to the city. So that pledge has been honored. So to the base, what should the budget base be? We operated as if that were not in the budget, so it's fair to say 85 million is the base, so that's what the city manager did, and I respect that. So I'll move on from the first slide and go to the second slide. Now, during the budget process, I identified 3 or 4 big unknown areas. One was health insurance. We were facing a 20% increase. Had several meetings that both Josh and I attended with our broker and Anthem and so on and so forth, so we put 20% in as placeholder. As time has gone on, it appears very likely that 20% is going to be the real number. And that's what the city has on their side, and that's what we have on our side, and that's a big number. There were 2 other areas in the budget that I identified as very difficult areas to budget. One is unemployment. If you look, I have a little history there. I went back to the pre-pandemic levels, and our actual unemployment expense was roughly $220,000. And the pandemic came in March of 2020, and unemployment, sorry about that, I thought I turned it off. It's gone. So 2021, call it the full year of the pandemic, it ballooned up to $338,000. This year's budget, I believe, is over $600,000. So the dilemma is, what should we budget for what might be a normal year? So the budget has $300,000 in it. So if I'm looking for an area where we could conceivably make a reduction, it would be in that line item. It doesn't affect any programs. You have to keep in mind that when unemployment happens, municipalities pay dollar for dollar, so regardless of what the budget is, when unemployment hits, we will pay it. I would have to discuss this with the board tomorrow evening, but we could reduce that sum without putting the district at a severe financial risk. The second area is temporary help. I swear our office isn't central office. I think it's a recruiting and interviewing place. Every time I go up to see Dr. Stringfeld, there's a sign, interviews in progress. We have, like most districts and municipalities, McDonald's, recruiting and hiring and retaining people is very difficult. That's what the 2 line items for temporary help take care of. If you look at the history there, pre-pandemic, and for the 2 items combined in 1920, we spent just under $600,000. The year of the pandemic, it ballooned up to $725,000. This year, I'm estimating that we're going to spend just under 1.5 million. That's been offset by savings or variances in the salary line item, because if you can't hire people, these aren't new positions, they're filling in for vacancies that we have, and oftentimes it's at a lower pay rate. So then the question becomes, what should we budget for next year, which hopefully will be a more normal year? So right now, the budget is just under 1.3 million. Could that conceivably be reduced by an amount? Probably, but it's a calculated risk. So we'll be discussing those items tomorrow night at the Board of Ed meeting. But if I had to peg a number, I would probably recommend to the board $100,000 for each of those two line items. So that would be 200 of the target of 1.1. The rest, I think, is all invested in programs that are on a need basis. Keep in mind, too, that as Dr. Stringfellow mentioned, because of the pandemic, all of our contracts were pushed back, extended by MOAs, so we're basically negotiating every contract. So when we built the budget, it was built on assumptions for salaries and benefits and so on and so forth. Right now, I believe we still have 2 contracts that will affect next year. The paraprofessionals are underway and administrative assistants, so we don't know the final outcome of those. Then our state budget is also in session now. The session is scheduled to end May 4th. The governor has made some recommendations that would affect our district. As we know, our state budget is a 2-year process, and last year the budget was approved for 2 years. So right now, in the Alliance grant, our budgeted increase is $1,316,000. We did receive that this year as well. In the mayor's the city manager's presentation, he pegged our Alliance grant at $914,000, and I would agree with him 100% for putting that in as the budgeted number. That's the governor's proposal. We don't know if the governor's budget will pass or if we'll fully receive the 1.3 million. If that does happen, that would be an additional $401,000. What Dr. Stringfellow and her staff has based the Alliance grant preliminary planning on is a $914,000 increase. So we are in agreement with the city manager in terms of what should the budget be for the Alliance grant. And as John did mention, that is outside the scope of the operating budget and the city council's control. The district has a process to follow. So you have to submit a plan, and I did give you a handout that kind of details some of the procedures and processes that the district has to go through. It's interesting to note, too, that the governor has made recommendations in there on adjusting some of the processes and procedures, and I gave you that in a separate handout. So I think I'm, yes, but that's the next year. I'm done with that slide. The next one is a global budget summary. And I call this the Big Four. The top 4 items, salaries, fringes, tuition, and transportation, account for 90.3% of our budget. To some extent, these are fixed in nature. Our labor rates governed by contract. You can only influence salaries by either increase or decreasing positions. Our fringe benefits, again, we have big impact on increase due to health insurance. A really big number in there, probably it's the single biggest item in our budget is budgeted tuitions. That's 37.6% of our budget. Not going to discuss that now. I have a separate slide on that later on. And transportation, mostly which is contracted with us per student, is another 9.4%. The other items, heating expense, electricity, water, and sped contracted services are fixed by nature, and rounding out the total for those main budget drivers, that counts for 94.1% of our budget, leaving the balance at 5.9. And I don't want to imply that the remaining 5.9% is discretionary. That covers things like instructional supplies, cleaning supplies, technology, so on and so forth. So this is an education, people-driven business, and that's always been the way education has been. The next 4 slides I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. Basically, just a breakdown of where the salaries are. First slide breaks out the Board of Ed supplies on the certified and non-certified, temporary, and you can see that overall, compared to this year's budget, salaries are up 3.3%, which is a number that I would expect based on step increases and percent wages. The next slide just gives you a flavor for certified staff by school. As would be expected, the two largest schools, Kelly and teachers, have the largest budget in terms of dollars and FTEs. And keep in mind, this is all certified staff, which includes teachers and administrators. The next slide is the non-certified budget. 211 FTEs totaling $8 million. It's everybody else, the paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, nursing staff, custodians, and non-union people like myself and facilities manager, technology department, etc. The next is a combination of total salaries between grants and non-grants. So you can see we have certified, non-certified, and paraprofessionals in the grant side, roughly about just under maybe $15 million. And the balance, again, is the 27 that's highlighted in the 23 summary. Next slide is transportation, district fuel, and tuition. Combined, this is just under 50% of our budget, 47.6%. I'll spend some time on the tuitions in the next couple of slides. But again, this is a major chunk of our budget. District fuel is in constant. I still think that might hold true. This year's budget, we're going to come in under budget. Prices continue to go and continue to rise. Our school district, much like the city or any other business, is faced with rising costs, unavailable materials not being available, supply chain issues, so on and so forth. So that's might become more of a concern as time goes on. The next slide is fringe benefits. Again, that's a big piece of our budget, just under $9 million for this year. Next year it's going up to $9.2 million. The big item was an increase of 20% on health insurance, but as the city manager talked to you, OPEB was going down, so that helped to mitigate the pain. We're going to have a big decrease in our OPEB benefits by $476,000, so that really does help the budget out quite a bit. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about tuitions. This is a big challenge for us. Right now in the early winter, we're trying to predict where 1,750 of our students will go to school. NFA is the largest chunk, and it's a real budget help to know a year ahead of time because we pay in arrears by 1 year for NFA. So that tuition number for NFA is not going to change, and that's almost half of our tuition budget on the regular ed side. So that's a nice thing to have in place. But our students have the benefit of 5 designated high schools, 13 magnet schools, the state VOAG program at Ledyard, technical schools in Norwich and Groton, and 7 specialized programs at NFA. Included in our total tuition budget are outplacement tuitions for special ed students. It includes the places listed below: Lighthouse, Edelbrook, Learn, Waterford Country School, the Hope Academy, New London Public Schools, Griswold, Lifespan, Horizons, Colchester's, EastCon, ACES, and anyone else that might come along as a result of an IEP. So the budget was based on an NFA increase of 2%, and that did prove to be true for almost all of their programs. The Learn schools were budgeted at 1.99, so they came in at 2% as well. How we do the enrollment, it's based on trends in the incoming class, so we don't know how many of our 8th graders might choose to go to a magnet school, so we look at previous year's history and try to estimate. Then we take the current student enrollment by grade, age them forward 1 year, because we assume that if you're in a program in the 2nd or 3rd year of a school, you're going to finish out there. And then that's how we do the budget. The VOAG tuition rate is set by the state based on, in those handouts, there's no increase in state funding, so our assumption is the tuition rate is going to stay the same. That's what I used in the budget. Our excess cost reimbursement grant is budgeted the same. In terms of the percent reimbursement, you'll see in one of those handouts, the governor has not increased special ed funding for excess cost by $1. It's still in at $140 million, and that's for the entire state. So by statute, we're supposed to be reimbursed at 100%, but we end up getting 70 to 75%, 78%, depending on all the other districts in the state and what their enrollment is on high-cost students. And if you recall, the threshold is 4.5 times your net cost per pupil, so in round numbers, our number this year is a little over $90,000. Transportation is another big number, that's a little over $9 million. It's based on our current contract with First Student. We had entered into a 5-year contract, and next year, 22-23 is the last year of the contract. So we will be working with the city's purchasing agent early in the year to create an RFP to go out to bid. We won't be waiting until late spring, so that will be going out to bid. The bus rate increase is 2.5%, and that's fixed by contract. We do change our routes every year. Sometimes we have to add or decrease buses depending on enrollment and where students live and district needs. Other transportation that's in the budget is contracted transportation with private carriers such as Curtin, RSY, AB Transportation, East Con, and Lighthouse. We try to get the most economical transportation. I know I worked with special ed director for 1 or 2 students, and it was actually hard to find anyone to do the transportation. So these private carriers are having the same issues that every other work employer is in the area. Our district fuel usage was based on estimated gallons using 2021 data and pricing that is now outdated. Historical data is hard to come by because 18-19 was the last year that I call a normal year for bus transportation. 1920 and 2021 were convoluted and sometimes as clear as mud because of the COVID, so we really can't go by gallons used or what the transportation costs were. It is important to note that the district does not have a fixed fuel price. Most districts or municipalities enter into an annual contract where you pre-buy your fuel. The problem with the bus company is we do not have a gas tank. I believe the location of the bus depot is in a floodplain and you can't put a gas tank there. So I know in my previous district they're still buying gas this year at $1.78 a gallon because we bought it when the oil was trading at $0 a barrel. So there are advantages to having your own fuel tank, and that would be one thing to consider going forward as part of the building project. And facilities, we have to heat our building. We met with NPU, and they're great at providing our estimates. They do a very detailed analysis on the estimate that's in our budget are their numbers, and I have no reason to discount their numbers or think that they're not good. I have a little historical data here on what the 19, 20, 21 expense were, and you see a big jump there, and I believe that was attributed to a pandemic where oftentimes because of the lack of ventilation in our buildings, we were heating the buildings and faculty in rooms had their windows open. And if you live in your house, I know my wife, she likes fresh air, but I have discussions with her when she wants to open the window in January. So this year's, I'm expecting, my estimate is based on heating expense through March. We should be at about $579,000. I've found historically the heating bill for April, May, and June, if you add the sum of that together, it's usually equal to March's heating bill unless you have a really cold spring. So I feel pretty good about that number. But overall, heat's a 12.3% increase above this year, and it's almost a 29% increase over the current year's budget. So that's a big impact to our budget as well. but we are going to heat our buildings. Then the last couple of slides here just deal with technology. It's not the people, it's just the hardware and supplies. You can see the expenses are about $874,000 for software, services, general supplies, and hardware. We do obtain a lot of capital through the E-rate program. You've probably heard me speak of that in the past. Basically, we get reimbursed for 85% on the dollar. We do have to pay a small fee to E-rate online for doing the procurement and so on and so forth, but in the end, it's a great opportunity. And I would add, this year, we also received 1,000 Chromebooks at no cost from E-rate because we qualified. Our IT director put in the grant, and we did receive that award. So it's a great program, and we utilize that every chance we get. And the last two slides just give you an idea of all the different softwares that are currently in the district. You'll notice that total comes to $476, but some of that is paid for by grants, thus the budget is only at $406. So that's the quick walk through the budget. The handout that I gave out during the budget season probably totaled, I don't know, 60, 70 or something like that, and would have been far too much to go through tonight. I think that covers the meat and potatoes, so I'll end it at that point, and I guess it'll be time for questions. And I'm sure there will be some.
Thank you very much. I just have one quick one. I'll pass it on to my colleagues. With the transportation contract going into its final year,
Yes, 22-23 is the final year.
is there still a provision that those that who can bid on the contract must be Norwich-based business?
I don't think that,
Years ago, that was there, and we only had one who could bid, and it takes away competition.
I know First Student was the only company that did bid on it. If there's a residency requirement, I'm not aware of that. And
This is going back a number of years. In fact, it was my first term as mayor, towards the end of that, but hoping that it's not there.
Yeah, I don't know where First Student's based. They're national, so I don't think they're based in Norwich.
Well, their offices are at Taffel,
If I may,
because they qualified, I believe, for that purpose. Who's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
if I may.
Please.
There was a caveat in that contract that the buses had to be housed in Norwich. And the previous business manager said that paying the the taxes on the buses would help offset the fact that their contract was more expensive than anybody else who was bidding.
They were the only bidder, and if that's the caveat,
That was the
probably
caveat.
work to change that.
That was the caveat.
That is correct.
I mean, parking buses is always an issue. I was in one district where they utilized one of the school parking lots on an interim basis. I mean, we have a great transportation company, but if we compare rates, I think our rate is a little on the high side.
But the rationale was it was offset by the taxes that we were receiving for the buses being located here in town.
We operate on average, I believe, 51 regular education buses and 39 special ed buses. Regular ed transportation is just under $22,000 per day, and special ed isn't far behind that. So if we're paying $40,000 a school day, I don't know what property taxes are going to offset that.
So if that's a function of the school department requiring that, and it's not a function of the city requiring that, then I think we can say confidently that we can go back to our legal department and have them draft something that doesn't have that in it.
Well, I think your RFP should just be for services, transportation provided to whatever you need. And I don't think that that's a necessary caveat personally, but I would agree.
I'd agree 100%. I was in a district where the provider had a hub in Old Saybrook and Wyndham, and the school district was in neither, but they had the best service for us at the best price.
Thank you. Question by members. President Pro Tem, please.
Well, just to extend Alderwoman Gould's point, It's not small money that we're collecting in revenue, so I would, do what you have to do what's in the best interest of the school system and hence the city. But I would ask you also do the math from the assessor's office to see what are we taking in terms of tax revenue, because, obviously that's part of the bigger equation.
Yeah, point well taken.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Other members' concerns, questions? Alderman Wilson.
Good evening. Thank you, guys. First, I will start by saying this is probably the most comprehensive presentation I've ever seen that gives a complete rationale of the budget. One area that I want to talk about, I know it's in the overall budget, is the SROs program, and I think we discussed, the need for it in the schools, the support for the program, and I figured in this form, it's something that we'll continue to have the conversations about, but the rationale for it going in on the budget side versus possible grants or ESSER funds or things of that sort. So kind of just giving that the floor.
So we've been discussing that since President Pro Tem DeLucia visited our Board of Ed meeting. Bob and I have discussed it. We haven't discussed it with the board yet, but we hope to tomorrow. The rationale for putting it there in the first place was the sense of permanency to the community, that this is not something we're investing in temporarily. It's likely not a result of COVID. We believe these to be necessary positions in our schools. Having said that, Bob and I have talked about where else could they be fit into a grant, knowing that after a significant period of time, we may have to move it back into the local operating budget. And Bob did his due diligence, reached out to the State Department and found that we are permitted to hold it in one of our grants, and that's a conversation that we'll have tomorrow evening. We've even added an SRO since the last time we spoke as a group. Having been the I'm going to say associate principal at Global for the last 2 months, it became really clear that our 7 elementary schools and our Bishop preschool are in need of that type of an officer that has a relationship with the principals, understands our kids, and can come right away, but not a different officer every time. And so we were finding that although we invested in the 2 middle school resource officers, they were often called out of the middle schools. And then when they were gone, we were operating at a deficit. And so we added that 3rd position. It was an officer who was going to be the permanent substitute, if you recall, had already, the chief of police, a wonderful partner to us, by the way, had agreed to put him forward in the training. And Officer Homan joined us today, actually, and we used grant funds for that position.
Thank you. And the only reason, I think I understand, even once some of the grant funds that many school districts got, of course, over due to COVID and all of that, as those dissipate and the conversation of where it fits permanently, even then is a bigger. But for me, I think the bigger question was giving it some time for us finding its permanent space. I think that was the bigger concern here. I think going back and forth as we did before over it, I think it's a need, and it definitely will do its part in the school system, but I think that was just one of our bigger questions, so thank you.
Yeah, we did, to echo Dr. Stringfell's comments, take Mr. DeLucia's suggestion to heart and had correspondence with the state, and the state did say that's an accepted use of ESSER funds, and they actually suggested that if we did go down that route to enter into an MOU with the city, and we've already done that, so we did things correctly. We could strategically move that into one of the grants, and I know that's been a subject that has come up and will continue to come up as part of the discussion. I would note when the district wrote these grants, they're very detailed, very specific, targeted areas, and we're writing grants that were 3 years down the road with good intentions that we're going to hire X number of professionals in this capacity to meet this need. So we write those grants, and then time marches on, and guess what? We needed 15 reading specialists, and Bosra did, and Preston did, and, Hartford did, and every other district, and you add up the sum of reading specialists, and there's not enough to go around. So there might be funds available that we would have to strategically look at with Dr. Stringfeld, the board, and Tamara to see, okay, these are what the plans are, this is reality, is there enough funding to do this? What happens when the position expires? Do we rotate it into the operating budget? As we get future Alliance grant increases, could this possibly, whether it's a reading program or some other program designed to improve student needs, could those positions then be rotated in a strategic way where they're part of the planned use of increased ECS grants coming down the road so that it doesn't impact this? So there's a lot of homework in that area of looking at alternate sources of getting to the same dance of what we have in the budget now and meeting those needs.
And I mean, the follow-up to that piece would be, does that, moving it around, would that change the overall percentage of the budget?
Yes, because if,
Anything that we take out of the general operating budget will change
So
our overall ask. from the city.
in round numbers, if the two items that I proposed, I guess I'll call it a proposal, or suggestions.
An
Early thoughts, $200,000 there, and if we did in fact move the SROs, that's $450,000 of a $1.1 million target. That gets us $700,000 remaining to get to the dance, and we haven't impacted the school district in any way, shape, or form. Added a little bit of risk on the unemployment side, but I think it's a tolerable level of risk. Would I prefer to not cut the $100,000? Yes, because I feel much safer. But I don't think that would put the district at risk. So we can do things like that. We have other sources. This is unusual. We have other sources of funding. We have the non-lapsing fund where you have, I think, $1,670,000 set aside for future needs. One option would be to fund things from there, but I would strongly urge the Board of Ed not to consider that. That wasn't set up last year with the intent of funding normal operating expenses. It was set up as a future capital account to be self-reliant so we don't have to raid the city coffers when we have emergencies. We have a building committee that's in progress. We don't know where exactly that's going to go. I think the Board of Education has been extremely fiscally responsible in that we haven't had one conversation on should we spend money from the non-lapsing fund. It's sitting there for its intended purposes. So that would be an option, but I would recommend to the board not to do that.
Thank you, and go ahead. Yeah.
No, at this time.
No, thank you.
We're still struggling, as you know, with some significant facilities issues. The teachers' global memorial boilers have gone beyond their extended life, much like Stanton. Today, we had an issue at Stanton with windows. At the last storm with our central office, windows just blew right out of the building. And so we're really putting a lot of our faith in the facilities committee to bring around some significant ideas. And we think that it'll have savings in the long run anyway because of the efficiency and effectiveness with how we heat our buildings. Largely, teachers are, I've been a teacher, it's really hard to teach in the extremities of cold and hot. And so if the boiler is aging and you're not getting efficiency with the heat and it's hot, they're gonna open a window. They're not gonna wait 4 hours for the building to cool down. The children can't wait. And so we're hoping that action happens and that will help all of us.
Thank you. And just the last thing for me it's not necessarily in this packet, but going to the different budget expenditure committee meetings is giving you kudos on the formation of the maintenance crew within your overall facilities. Over time, it will show a huge savings with the amount of equipment you will have to continuously, you would have been continuously replacing a mower at every school and this, and so, I think you've been very strategic and creative to find efficiencies within the school department, so I definitely wanted to give you the kudos for that piece as well.
Yeah, I would like to embellish on that for the balance of the council who might not be aware of that proposal. We do have 2 new positions in the budget called landscape/maintainers. Right now, the way we're structured, lawn maintenance, cutting grass, shrubs, picking up the trash is the duty of our custodians. And some schools have 1 custodian on duty during the daytime. So we all know that grass starts to grow in April, and around here it seems to last till October. So if you look at a campus the size of Moriarty, it takes a long time to cut that grass. So I know from practical experience, a custodian needs to be in the lunchroom from 10:30 to 1 every day. So he might start to cut the grass early, or she. Get a call from the radio, I have to go inside, and cutting grass takes 2 or 3 days that looks unkept. From a personal perspective, our schools are our house for our students and faculty, and they should look nice even if they're old. Trash doesn't get picked up, it's an afterthought sometimes, not because they don't care, they don't have time. String trimming isn't done as often as it should be, and cutting of hedges. And then the capital issue, we have 9 schools, 4 of the buildings we maintain. We end up having zero-turn mowers at every school, hand mowers, duplication of equipment. We have people who are not as experienced running equipment as they should. The facilities director and I think 2 people, if they strictly cut grass and did the outside maintenance, they could take care of all of our buildings in a week time. On rainy days, they would do maintenance on our equipment because they would be skilled in that. We wouldn't be sending it out to local mower shops. I met with our facilities director and I met with our 2 maintainers. We only have 2 maintainers in 13 buildings. They're good employees and they do good work, but they're feeling frustrated. One of their main concerns, and this meeting was on Monday, to be exact, no, Friday afternoon. They feel overwhelmed and that they're not doing their jobs because they never get it done. And you might say, gee, you're hourly employees, why would you care? Well, they care. They never have enough time. So the plan would be from March through early April, they'd be indoors, they'd have maintenance skills, and they'd be assisting the maintainers, doing things like sealing tiles, doing light maintenance that always seem to be on the back burner. So we'd have to spend a little bit of money, so if I had to draw a line in the sand, that's something I would fight very hard for, not to eliminate from the budget. We have about $115,000 of capital for a truck, appropriate truck that they could also use for snow plowing. We contract out snow plowing at Bishop's. Sometimes that's $3,000 a storm. They would be able to do that because that would have the vehicle and that would be within their skill set. I'm in the process of doing a forecast at year end. I suspect, well, not suspect, I'm pretty certain that we're going to have a surplus above and beyond the $1.2 million that we promised to the city. So another way of strategically reducing next year's budget is to move one-time capital items or expenses that you know you can buy in this year's budget. So to the extent that if the Board of Ed agrees to keep these positions in the budget, we could shift some expenses related to things like that from next year's budget into this year's, spending it out of money we might have left over. So that's another way to get to the dance. Strategic
Can't wait till
purchasing of
this
items.
dance.
Sounds like a prom.
He didn't, yes, you can have more water.
Thank you.
Alderman Gould still have the floor. Do you want it?
Thank you.
We had your hand up.
Yes,
Yeah, please.
thank you. How many employees do you have? Yes, I have.
FTEs are employees,
How many paychecks?
but I don't know the number of paychecks
Okay,
because
you have a number here,
707, I believe, is,
and then I have 770.
that probably
Page
includes.
39.
I didn't do page 39 but I won't shift all the blame. I think the city book includes adult ed and food services, which they're enterprise operations and are not part of the operating budget. So I believe if you were to add that to the 707 number, you'd probably come close to what the number is there.
770. Last year, you had 678.
I didn't do last year's number, and I don't know if I
Okay.
bet my paycheck on it.
Right here, my book from last year.
I do not doubt you one bit.
Okay, so
think
how
it's-
many employees have we added in this year? How many full-time employees have we added in this current year?
Not in grants. In the budget. Bob's given you that in the budget.
So how many employees have we added in the year? I don't care where they came from, because you list over here 770 employees. Over here, 677. How many, because when I went to Stanton School and teachers and the rest, that's about 100. From 677 to 770.
Are you looking in the budget book? Is someone going to bring me?
I just,
Thank you, Josh.
so on Bob's page here, 70708, that ties exactly to the elementary education number on page 39.
Right, but-
And then the other positions these positions have always been there for food services and adult ed.
Right.
You know,
But
approximately
last year,
30.
general fund, food service, other positions came to 677.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And now, elementary, food service, adult ed is 770. So that is 100.
I don't know a nice way to say this, but I don't think the 670 is the correct number. I don't know where it came from. I won't say it's fiction, but there's no way on the planet we could go from that 600 number to 700 some number and have a positive variance the size that we do in terms of FTEs from a logic. And I don't know where the number came from, so I can't say.
I don't know. Josh, do you make this up at night when you're asleep?
No, yeah, I mean, it was the number I was provided earlier, but it was not a number that Bob came up with.
Last year's book,
Yep.
right here, 677.
Yep.
Was that the budget for this year or an actual number? Well, the budget, the actual number is this year. I could come up with a number for this year based on who we have on the payroll. Let me say this. The budget that is before you for the Board of Ed is based on every person on the payroll as of the second payroll in February, plus 14 vacant positions. And that totals 707. So
So we added 14 positions this
no,
year?
there's 14 vacancies. The budget that calculated out to the dollars on this sheet is based on everyone who was in the payroll on February 28th, plus on there were 14 certified positions vacant. Authorized positions, but vacant.
Okay. I think a couple of things. One, Josh writes the book based upon information that he was provided from either payroll or our office before Bob got there.
Okay.
I think that's an important point. Number two, I think that you have to consider every single day, if you said to me, how many people work in the school department today at 2 o'clock and today at 3 o'clock, that number changed. Because we have an ebb and flow of these vacant additional positions. And as Bob has said, for the entire COVID time period, we have had 6 to 8 preschool special ed vacancies, 6 to 10 middle school teacher vacancies, dozens of paraprofessional vacancies. And so in one period of time, we hired a teacher in an example where we could not find 2 or 3 special education paraprofessionals. We have been bringing in long-term substitutes because of the flexibilities that the certification office has provided to us. It is a huge organization that has an unbelievable ebb and flow. Bob's not kidding. Every single day I'm interviewing, most days. And so it's not, it sounds simple when you're asking the question. It's not simple. And we are constantly going against the tide of what we inherited, to be quite honest. And so I know that I can't rely on numbers that were in any form until recently. The last year is when the numbers are the most solid. And I said that in the beginning when I met you all, that you know we had difficulty reconciling when I first. Oops.
You want to see my book from last year?
No, I want to see it.
And so we now have real numbers. Is the only way that we can.
This is my base going forward. As we fast forward and sit here a year from now, you will be able to, you or anyone else can compare next year's budget to this year's budget and what's in there. That's the best I can do with that.
Okay. I'm going to try to phrase it a different way. How many new positions have we added? From administrative assistants?
We have added many new temporary grant positions, most assuredly. We have eliminated and added, I don't have that number in front of me, but we can try to get it to you. What usually gets very confusing is the amount of in this budget compared to grants. So I'll give you an example. We have a LEAP grant where we had to, we were offered this opportunity through Learn. It's for home visitors. And we added dozens of stipended positions for home visitors. It's a 1-year only grant funded program. I know that's a new position. So when you say to me, how many positions have we added? I want to include things like the LEAP officers. They're temporary, they're COVID money. It's not having to do with this budget. So we want to answer you properly, but it's usually a combined effort of this budget and grants.
Then there's
And one more thing. The Alliance grant, which you see is increasing by about $900,000. Adding positions in Alliance, they have to be new positions. And so we will continue to add, as I said when I started, special education teacher positions and support, ESL positions and support as the need presents itself. And the needs in the last 2 years have been significant, so there have been additions in those areas.
Okay.
Then there are things that, I don't know how you classify this, where you have a vacancy, could be RBTs or instructional specialists or something that you don't fill the position. So in assessing the needs of the district, that position is eliminated and those salary dollars are used for a different type of position. Is that considered a new position or reprogramming of existing funds? So it's spread out and there's a lot of different ways to answer the question, but again, I've identified the FTEs that are in the budget and by category. So next year when we're sitting here, you'll have a base to go back to and say, why did this change from 707 to 715? What are the 8 differences? And we can track the ins and outs, where if this instructional specialist goes away and then now it's called something else, or if safety officers went away and we replaced them with RBTs, 6 of these became 4 of those, and 4 of these became 10 of those. And I'm not kidding about the interviews every day.
And I think another piece that we don't get to talk about is the fact that I needed to do a staffing audit when I first came here, not just in the business department. So to talk about, ESL program, we completely overhauled the ESL program because when I got here, we had very few ESL teachers, many ESL paras. So that cost a significant amount of money to be able to go in and right-size the loss scores with student need, with the requirements from the state and federal government, and then change out paraprofessionals for teachers. We didn't have an ESL director, and we have a significant population of students who speak a language other than English. So imagine that happening in every single department in the school department in the last 3 years over COVID. It is not a simple, there are 4, there are 50, there are 12. It's just not that simple. So I ache for the fact that you would love to know this answer. We're pleasers. We would love to give it to you. But it's not as simple as I think it feels to you folks.
All right, well, I'll move on. Ed Peckham, the resource officer. What's he done in the last year?
So we kept a tally every single month that I reported out at the Board of Ed meeting of sensational numbers. He is continuing to work and bring in significant savings. Again, the taxpayers and folks reading the headlines are like, okay, good. Ed Peckham saved you $1 million. Then why isn't this money like $1 million less? And it doesn't work that way for the very reason that Bob talked about in terms of the way that high school tuitions
Right, but at some point in time, that should get reflected somewhere.
Absolutely, it does. And that's why we're continuing that, and all the other efficiencies that our team makes every day are reflected in the fact that you went from significant deficit to we're giving back as much money as we possibly can to you.
So is he finding an average of 2 students a month, 5 students a month, 10 students a month?
We can get you a complete report of exactly how many students and if they're high school tuitions or if they're high-need preschool students or they're out-of-district special education tuitions that we're not paying anymore. What we are finding is he's one man, and so we are planning on adding with ESSER funds a specialist, detective, or investigator, for lack of a better word, so that we can prove residency. Right now, we only prove residency at kindergarten enrollment and at the move from 5th grade to 6th grade. And to be able to prove residency in every single grade level and every single high school in every single special ed tuition would take a team and a department. We're trying not to move too quickly, but we know that 1 or 2 positions in that office would pay for themselves almost immediately. But we will get you, we'll send you a report. Do you want it for just this year or since he started?
No, just this year, because I believe I have his report from last year.
I did do one analysis. I went back and updated or corrected it from during the budget process, and I looked at net tuitions, where we look at total tuition and minus out the impact of the excess cost grant. And our budget next year for total tuitions, as I believe, is either 1.1 or $1.3 million less than actual expense from 4 years ago. Now, I know we've had some declining enrollment, but on the surface, I would attribute that decrease. We've had 4 years of tuition increases in all the programs. That it's been a combined effort of having the residency officer and our special ed director and her fellow administrators working hard to bring out-of-district placements back into the district. So those are actual numbers. It is over a 4-year time span.
Okay, and I was going to ask one other question. How many other, so you're adding 2 maintainers in this 22-23. How many other new positions are you adding to this budget?
I know there are 2 dean of students that are budgeted in there. They were this year budgeted in, I believe, ESSER 1. So they're in at a cost of $95,000. I didn't consider those to be new positions.
They're teacher positions.
Okay, but they're coming out of this other pot over here into the general fund.
Right.
Are there any others that are coming out of the grant bucket into the general fund bucket?
I don't have any that I'm aware of.
Okay. And you're getting one new pickup truck?
That we
There-
might be able to buy this year.
There are 2 trucks planned in the capital side on the budget.
2 pickup trucks?
Right. I believe one could be a small mason dump, I'm not sure, and the other is a pickup truck. Right now, our facilities director uses his own vehicle to schlep all over town. And I don't know if most maintenance directors have a district-provided vehicle.
Especially when he was delivering masks and test kits, that became really difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members, questions? Alderman Singh.
Just a quick one. So this temporary support and salary budget summary, we are increasing that or proposing to increase that 144%. Is that
Temporary
temporary
That retained?
staff, yeah.
Well, we're actually lowering it, but it's pretty steady.
Yeah. I don't like the name for that line item, temporary personnel. Most districts call it substitutes.
Okay.
So I don't know where that came from, and I'm going to work to change that. We fill vacancies for certified staff and paraprofessionals, 2 mechanisms. The district employs Kelly services for substitute teachers and paras. Their fill rate has been about 30 to 35%. So I know I look at the attendance report on any given day, and if there are 60 vacancies that say they need a sub, it might be 18 to 20 that are actually filled. So that means the district would go without. One of the ways of filling those vacancies, the superintendent created a position called substitute teacher. So
It's like a building sub. It's a floater teacher. So we utilized the certification flexibilities to be able to bring on staff that would be in the building all day, every day, based upon a number of sure absences that would happen by school. We have every single day throughout the district subs needed for teachers to attend IEP meetings and 504 meetings, and then we came up with a number that we were sure X number of people would either be ill or have a personal day or need coverage of some kind. And we hired building substitute teachers, if you will, at a daily rate. That's been a godsend. I don't know how we would have covered classes without having these folks. And on a given day, if we overestimated the need at Kelly Middle School, then the principals would speak and one would move to one of the other middle schools. We also didn't have a mechanism here for substitutes for principals. And so we don't have enough assistant principals to cover for the principals. We've had principals maternity leave. Now we're looking towards paternity leave with the changes in the regulations, which is good news for new dads. But we didn't have a mechanism for long-term coverage. And so you've seen the assistant superintendent and I have been at a school for 2 months every day. That's not typical. And we have, so we brought in some retired principals. And they have, again, been a godsend. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have some people who have experience being a principal coming in. There doesn't seem to be a mechanism in the state of Connecticut for that. And then we had COVID contact tracers. So we got to a point where 2 years into the pandemic, the principals and I have been doing all the COVID contact tracing with our nursing director, personally at home, in nights and weekends. And we got to a point with the, I've forgotten what happens after Delta. What happened?
Omicron.
Thank you. When that came out, we just we weren't sleeping anymore. There was just no possibility of doing all the contact tracing and contacting all the families and running a school or running the school department. So we brought on contact tracers. We meet with Kelly Services often, and what we found is they fill for teachers, paraprofessionals, and administrative assistants or secretaries. But what was our greatest need? It was teachers. And so we brought in temporary, if you will, trying to think of, not a substitute, but a daily building sub for a secretary, brought some on board, and COVID contact tracers so that they could help us. And because we didn't have anyone showing up from Kelly Services when a secretary was out sick. And you can ask anyone who one of the most pivotal people in the entire building is, and it's going to be that school secretary. So that's been a hefty line item for the 2 COVID years.
So to your question, if you go back to 1920, before the pandemic, that line item that filled substitutes was $592,000, and I'm not sure if you had Kelly Services back at that point. So that was substitutes. I would have called that 2 line items, certified subs and non-certified subs, $592,000. It's now mushroomed up to almost $1.5 million this current year, in addition to the outside professional fees we pay to Kelly Services. So that's why I described that during the series of budget meetings as a very difficult number to budget. What will it be in next year's environment if we remain COVID-free? Will we get back to some sense of normalcy in terms of what a stable staff is? Pre-pandemic, in most districts, absences, once your staff was hired, it was easy to forecast salaries for the remainder of the year because nobody left. I mean, if you accepted a teaching position, whether it was in Norwich, Waterford, and London, you stayed there for the year, unless you moved because a spouse was moving, or you had a terrible illness, or you decided to retire mid-year. It wasn't this puddle jumping from school to school or just saying, I'm done. So it was fairly easy to predict your absences for substitutes based on historical data, because in a large district, you followed the norm. There was always so many pregnancies or maternity leaves, that you always had the surgeries or broken legs and the number of sick days. It was fairly predictable. This is like off the charts. I have no idea.
And remember that this is offset by the fact that we've had vacancies all year long, particularly at the middle level and at the preschool level. And so you're not seeing the salary either in the budget or in grants. Because, we would not choose a substitute over a full-time teacher, but that we've had to make those decisions this year.
So I've made this comment from a pure financial standpoint. It's not a bad thing if you're paying someone $260 a day, it ends up being $43,000 instead of an MA-13. From an educational standpoint, it's awful.
And when, I echo the thoughts of the building inspector. I said to Mr. Perry, when they were saying we're trying to hire a building inspector and 3 people have 3 job offers, I said, that sounds like teaching, because that's what I'm facing. We go to a Yukon job fair and we're having to make hiring decisions on the spot pending a reference check, and because those folks are scooped up before we can even schedule a big interview with them. And that's happening every single day.
It's the same in custodians and technology. So I have more custodian interviews Thursday. It's like same thing with tech. I've had 4 new people come since August.
Also, the NFA budget has gone up 2%, right? Like last time, there were some of the programs which were up almost 60%, especially related to the special ed students.
They've done some reformatting of the SACHM special needs students and the career and technical programs. So we're not expecting an overall increase. I think it's level 2% across the board.
Yeah, it was 2, and I think 1 program went up significantly from this year's actual, and 2 others came down. I didn't bring the detail on all of those programs. I think the resource program is one of the most difficult to know. I think the student range could be anywhere from 140 140 to 160, and that's a fairly expensive program.
Because pretty much NFA tuition fee budget is almost 20% of your total budget, if I'm right?
And NFA regular tuition is about $16 million. So in round numbers, the regular ed piece is roughly half of the tuition budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. I mean, the only thing that I have to, the part where you talk about the line item of the temporary staffing and whatnot and the large jump, I think you attribute that, you're sitting here talking about vacancies, but that's also the long-term sub that all of a sudden you have to add to that line item. So you may be paying for an individual in that for a short time, but that's several different individuals that you've had hop into that one teaching position or paraprofessional position. I think the other thing, as you've said, is just as realistic about education right now is as you went a year, part of the year where you probably didn't have many PPTs and all those other things because just the circumstance. Now that all of those things are getting back on track, you are picking up students that maybe last year at this time didn't need a paraprofessional, didn't need certain services. So I think, when we look at the overall number of employees, but we also look at where we are within this pandemic, and within a year, we are in a huge different place as far as
The student need
the need.
is
And so
incredibly different than
that
it was
that
2 years ago.
I think this is on a more normal track of where we are. And I think I'll just say it. I think the realistic piece is I wouldn't be surprised you see staffing numbers this high for some time because there is a catch-up period of a lot of things that we will find out. As you have said, there are those unknowns. So, I think it's realistic to know. I mean, a teacher may have a job, but then realize something's closer to home, something's paying more within a school year, and I can change that. And I think if you look at just your personnel reports, it gives a good picture of that.
Something else that has to be said is that Bob and I had to come in, and I don't know what you're presuming, but most often you can presume that the staffing met the need. That was not the case, and it still has not been the case. And so when we came in and said, why are there so many errors in this particular department? Why are the numbers not right, to your point? Like, why? Because we maybe had one person in a department or 2 people in a department that should have been right-sized to New London or Groton or another district, 10 times that amount. And folks that are specializing in particular areas. In a lot of cases, we've had, folks who are doing their very best work, but were not trained in order to do budget work or special education clerical work or ESL work. To this day, we don't have the support staff, the secretarial staff, or the folks who are supporting Bob, our ESL director. They don't have that. They don't have any of those things. And so we're continually trying to right-size, knowing that what we had before, the errors that were made and the difficulty that we had giving you the numbers you so desperately seek was because they were not correct. They were unknown to us. We didn't have the right staffing. So we're trying to do it well, do it correctly, and do it in a fiscally responsible way. And that means on occasion, we've had to make some shifts in personnel. Most of those have been reflected in grants. That's why when you try to pull out one sliver of this conversation, we can get you that information, but it's not going to be off the top of our heads. It's much too complicated of a process.
I'll go back to Darrell's question regarding the addition of the landscapers/maintainers, and I recognize that what's good for one district isn't necessarily good for this district, but one district I was in that had 5 buildings and a town hall to take care of, which is a total of 6. At that time, the oldest school was renovated as new and was 10 years old. the other 4 were brand new, they had 11 maintainers. We have 2 taking care of 13 buildings that range in age from 60 years to 100 years. So I'm not suggesting we should have 11, but I know 2 isn't the right number. So
Now extrapolate that to every single department in the school department. That's what we've been wrestling with since we both got here. We've worked in other places where you had high-level staff making decisions on some of these really important areas in special ed and ESL and finance and in all of the different departments, and that wasn't the case here. And so, yes, we're trying to use our grant money wisely to be able to add staff there, but have we added staff? Yeah. And the result is that the education, all right, the pandemic I totally did not predict. You can't get me that one. But with the educational process is getting more solid, and the fiscal climate is certainly leaps and bounds where we were a couple of years ago. Absolutely. And we anticipate that trajectory just continuing. And we're hoping to be COVID-free, and we can get back to all the plans that we made last year to be able to work with our kids and find even more efficiencies and increase effectiveness.
And, you know, I can't speak for Dr. Stringfellow from terms of educational planning, but if every year you're having to fill 150 or 200 positions, it's an enormous challenge from the finance side and human resource side, just from the interviewing, the filling out of applications, putting them in the payroll system, making sure everything's correct, and then you do it all over again the next year. So I don't like that environment. I want to be away from that, and I'm hopeful that whenever people talk about a new normal, it's going to certainly be reflected in this staffing and stability.
Other members? Alderwoman Gould.
Okay. Well, you don't have a budget book, so I'll read to you what it says here. Ensure alignment with middle school curriculum and high school pathways and college career.
Josh, I mean, I don't know I didn't write that, so I'm not sure what you're referring to, but.
Those are your action plans.
Okay, so.
Page 114, number 24.
So Josh is saying that he took that from our strategic plan, right? 114, number, say it again, please.
24?
Number 24.
Okay.
Okay?
What does that mean?
So what we found in our middle schools is that there is the stop is of a portrait of an 8th grader. And so we are taking stock of our programs and trying to match them to Norwich Tech, to NFA, to be able to create a continuum of K through 12, even though we don't have a 9 through 12. That is a lofty goal in our strategic plan. Kelly is right next door to Norwich Tech. Norwich Tech has a lovely tuition, I'm sure we can all agree. It's a wonderful opportunity for kids to be able to become an engineer, but we don't have, or a plumber or an electrician. We don't have middle school programs that align with those. And so you're going to see us creating curriculum and opportunities so that we hope that kids can walk next door from Kelly to Norwich Tech. And we hope that we can align better to the programs that are offered at NFA and our other high schools. An example, a concrete example of this would be our music programs. Up until this year, instrumental music was only offered at Kelly and Waquanic. And so we, last year, added instrumental music teachers at all schools so that no matter, where you live in Norwich, if you want to become a musician, you can do that. And that feeds into our programs at each of our high schools. So I think it's more of a portrait of a graduate in 12th grade and understanding that our kids don't stop in 8th grade.
I would like to add this. I think you know me well enough.
Sorry, do you have your book back?
I think you know me well enough by now where I'll speak my mind, and it hasn't gotten me in too much trouble yet. I will say I've had conversations with Josh, and I looked through the historical budget book that the Norwich Public Schools would give to the city, and it was probably 150 pages long, and it had a lot of nice stuff in there.
Pretty pictures.
There was a lot of
Pretty picture.
history and a lot of stuff, and I would like to get to that point where we give you more than this stuff. But as I told to Josh and Dr. Stringfellow, my focus now is on real numbers and figuring out fiscally where we are. If you came down to my office, there's a whiteboard with 20 projects on it that it says in progress, and we need to finish those things. So I did tell Josh next year we will give you more of something to put in, but the historical stuff is nice, but I'm not focused on that right now, and I just can't be, or I'm not going to be up here with a 2.3% increase. I'm going to be telling you, oh, it's 10 or 9 or 8 and not be able to answer your questions. So that's where I am in my position right now.
My last question. I don't know if this is a urban legend, rumor. Do our students, I'll say first grade through 8th grade, do they go home with homework?
Yes.
Everybody gets homework on a weekly basis, somebody? Because all I am constantly hearing that Norwich Public Schools does not send home homework.
So I can say with great certainty that a part of our Teachers College Reading and Writing program is volumes of reading good literature. And kids are going home with book bags filled with just right books and a certain amount of reading logs and a certain amount of building their stamina within these books.
Okay,
and
but
then there would be complementary mathematics work as well. Are they going home with a ditto, or are they doing them electronically? I'm not overly fond of dittos, so if someone is saying, my kid used to bring home a big pile of stuff and now they're just working digitally, or they're bringing home books, the type of homework over the years has likely changed, but I would say for the better. But yes, they have homework.
Okay, and across all grades?
I mean, I'm praying we don't give it to preschoolers.
Well, no,
but it
I'm
could
saying,
be.
first grade, they're getting
There
some
are-
sort of
there's some
assignment
sort of
on a
home-
weekly basis, whether it's, spelling, math.
I can speak
Something.
for first grade.
As a parent of a kindergartner, a second grader, and a fourth grader, I can probably recite 3/4 of those books inside of their book bags. And I have carpal tunnel from making out all the reading logs and correcting and going over their mathematics, especially in the second grade and fourth grade.
All right, I'm glad to hear it.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
my daughter's going to be, never mind how
Now,
old,
we
she'll be
all-
upset with me.
And first graders also getting homework. I can speak for that.
But I constantly hear this all the time, that Norwich Public Schools doesn't give homework. So I'm glad to hear that, because I think it's very important.
I'm so
an
glad.
urban
I was
legend.
really
It's
worried
an
about
urban legend.
It's an urban
Excellent.
legend.
All right, great.
I took a little shudder there, wondering what the urban
Yes.
legend could possibly be.
It could be kids.
We have the legend of Hell Hollow in Voluntown. I was hoping it wasn't something like that.
But if you want me to tell the children that Mrs. Gould.
No, Mrs. Gould
More homework,
encourages
I'm all over
homework.
that.
I think it's very important. I spent a lot of money on 3x5 index cards.
You did, personally.
Personally, for my daughter, who loved to put her things on 3x5 flashcards through
Okay.
high school and college.
I'm a big notepad person.
She liked 3x5 cards.
I can respect that.
Questions, members, others?
I just
Please, go ahead.
Not to prolong the evening, but I know the Board of Ed has a ton of work to do to see what we can do to get to the city manager's recommended budget. Am I correct in assuming that there will be ad hoc meetings? Or,
Yes, I did not want to schedule ad hoc meetings until you had a chance to sit here for the benefit of the community and the entire council. But yes, the email will, looking for available dates will probably go out tomorrow, if not tonight.
If possible, we are in negotiations on certain static nights. Would it be possible for you to, Amber has all of our schedules, or if that's a consideration, to find a night that we can set aside, that would help. So the Board of Ed members are just as you are, each out on subcommittees on certain nights.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, we look forward to those conversations. And thank you very much for your patience with us. We are doing the best we can with a system that we've inherited that that is a wonderful system, to be honest with you, in terms of kids and staff, but has been tricky for us in terms of the numbers that you seek. But if you can stay with us in terms of this being the foundational document and going forward, I've already told Bob he's never allowed to retire, then I think you'll be more than pleased with numbers that you can count on.
Everyone here's okay? Okay. So are you in communication with Senator Ralston at all, appropriations?
Yes, we are. She's always there for us. But
Well, I know that, that's true.
As you know, Peter, if you see her in person, she's on the fly, whether you're trying to catch her in the Capitol or anything. I just had a very brief conversation with her a couple weeks ago regarding Governor Lamont's proposal to put $90 million into the state budget for air quality. And all Kathy had time to tell me as she was fleeting down the hallway was that it's not enough money, we're going to tell them to bond it, and off she went. She does a good job for us.
When I talked to her the other day, she had mentioned that Approps had basically reported out 3 versions of a state budget.
Yeah.
The governor's, Approps, and I guess there's a hybrid somewhere along the path. I don't know what that represents. I haven't seen numbers yet, but it's a moving target. And the information that isn't timely doesn't help any of us.
No, I suspect it'll be May 4th when we know when the session ends. And as far as the Alliance grant, I agree with John using the $914,000 as opposed to the $1.3 million. I just hope it's not less. Because all he's doing is, he's not taking it away from us. It's an election year, and the towns that are scheduled to lose money, the only way he can hold them harmless is to decrease the amount of increases for the towns that are getting increases, if that makes sense.
There's winners and losers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So he's kicking it down the can.
Right.
We're supposed to be fully phased in by 2028, and he's looking to make that happen by 2030. So we wouldn't lose the $400,000 in the long run, we just wouldn't get it as quickly.
From the data I've seen, they're looking at a renewal of Alliance for 5 more years.
Yeah.
But that doesn't address the foundation that our ECS grant hasn't gone up in now 10 years.
Yeah.
They froze our education cost-sharing dollars and basically provided us Alliance grant and Network grant with the monies we would have gotten under ECS.
Yes, and that's what they tell us. They say, well, the increases for ECS is funneled through Alliance, but then we can't spend it the way we normally would from an operating budget, so then it becomes...
It's restrictive.
22.
It's categorical.
It's
Sorry.
great to get the extra money, but how many years in a row can you come up with new ways to spend the money to meet the needs that are identified and get blessed by the state that it's an acceptable program?
And if it's new salaries every year, then eventually, if they're not portable over to the operational budget, which how can it manage that, then we will hit a fiscal cliff. And so they're setting us up for some serious worries down the road.
It's the same thing with the tax, the holiday on the gas. You know, July 1st, it's back on.
Yeah, and then the highway funds that was supposed to go to aren't there.
Right.
Bless you.
Bless you. I'm glad you're here, Bob.
No.
Me too. It was
Me
not
too.
fun being him for a month or two that I did it.
Which Bob?
You.
Of course.
Bob squared.
You're so quiet, it's...
Oh, that's right. Correct.
Yeah, but when he
Thank you all.
speaks, it carries a punch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.